Good afternoon, everyone. This is your captain speaking. We're just about ready for takeoff now, so,
Shit, everybody move now. Go. Inside, everybody inside. To the stairs, quickly. Everyone head to the roof. The helicopter's waiting there. Go.
No, you're lying. That's what demons do. They lie to cause men of God to doubt.
I'm not telling any lies now, Father. I can feel it in your soul that you know what I say is true.
There's so much blood everywhere. Where be the rest of them? I can't tell. What is doing this, Mr. Simon? That couldn't have been done by no man, I swears it. I don't know.
From the minds of true crime guys comes Sandu Stories.
Our brand new channel devoted to our previously Patreon exclusive content, where we'll be bringing you our own version of true crime what-ifs and other audio dramas, one season at a time.
Join us wherever you get your podcast on February 7th. Now, let's get strange.
I can feel your fear growing and your faith dwindling. It's an intoxicating feeling. February 7th.
Hello and welcome back to the True Crime Guys podcast. I'm Lauren.
And I'm Michael.
I'd always been curious about this case, and I'd never dove into it. Always wanted to, and it's actually quite pertinent right now. It's in the news. It's relevant. It's still ongoing. And there was just a conviction made in October, a couple months ago.
Yep.
And another trial coming up, assuming Durst can make it to that.
Right. Assuming people don't end up dead.
Because he's on death's door at this moment. But this is a tale of money doesn't buy happiness. I think there's an asterisk next to that though. Like if you came from nothing and you worked your ass off and you became wealthy, I think it means a lot, and it can bring you a ton of happiness.
Yeah, and fulfillment,
but
because you earned it.
Born into it. Yeah, exactly. If you're born into it, you didn't earn it. I think that always weighed heavily on Robert Durst. I really do. I feel like you see glimpses of that where he mentions it, like when he was in jail.
Yeah.
And he talks about how like these men made what they have out of nothing. I'm like, they're in prison, bro. What do you mean what they made? Like they have nothing.
Yeah.
First of all, but like the fact that he was jealous of some dudes in prison because they actually made their own way in life. It's like that definitely weighed on him, among other things. I think he was a sensitive soul that lost his mother young, and we'll talk about all of that. But like,
absolutely,
he was different than his brothers,
Yeah.
And that's not to excuse any of his behavior, but like I think he would have been a different person completely if the circumstances of his life were different as well. So
yeah,
I don't know.
It's crazy.
He's a fascinating character.
Absolutely, and like his drive and his determination. Like if he were born poor, maybe he would have been not more successful financially and by the world's standpoint, but happier and more successful overall, and maybe even less controlling as well. I guess when you grow up with money,
he never got respect at all. He never got respect in his life, and I think that weighed on him as well.
Right. Well, at least not in his eyes. It seemed like people in Manhattan and people in New York and the areas he grew up in had a very high respect for his family.
But he didn't care about those peasants' thoughts.
Yeah, he didn't care.
He was raised to be above them, like as you see with his in-laws, his wife's family. He treated them like they were dirt.
Yeah.
So.
Yep. Man.
And this story, part of why it made it was so fun to study is because it had what all great true crime series or true crime cases have is an HBO docuseries. It just really takes it over the top.
You got to have an HBO docuseries called The Jinx.
Yeah. Some would say this guy, he was a jinx in life.
I guess. I think he caused all his bad luck, but I guess he was a jinx for other people. I see what you're saying.
Yeah. I love that part near the end of the series where they're like, it's just like everywhere he goes, it's like he's always at the wrong place at the wrong time. I'm like, that's not how it works.
No,
he created the wrong place at the wrong time.
Exactly. He created the wrong thing at the place he was at the right time.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's
right. Like if you go through a green light and you get T-boned by somebody that ran a red light, that's wrong place at the wrong time. Mm-hmm. If you go around like intentionally killing people, you that's on you, bro.
That is absolutely on you. Yep. And and we'll get into it, but I mean, I believe he was more hands-on too than what a lot of people think. I think a lot of people were like, "Oh, he probably paid." No, I don't think so. I think, yeah, he had a lot of money, but that's not what he wanted to rely on. He was used to having a lot of money. Mm-hmm. He had these strange little quirks, man. He had these strange quirks.
He was very cunning and very clever. He kind of walked around like a dunce a little bit and let people think that. Mm-hmm. But this dude was always calculating everything. But let's get into it before we just go on a tirade of talking about this. Let's tell the story the way it should be told. Extra long crime line. It's going to be a long episode. I hope you guys are happy.
You are somebody who you have admitted is a very private person, correct?
I am a private person.
Do you think the adjective very is unfair?
I'm happy to be a very private person, too, if that's what you want me to say.
Well, Mr. Durst, I only want you to answer the question as honestly as you can. Do you think it's fair? Do you think it's fair to refer yourself as a very private person?
I don't know the distinction between a private person and a very private person.
Well, so in terms of people that you know, people you've associated with, people you've had dealings with in your life, would you say that you are one of the more private people that you know?
I would really have to think about it to come up with an answer like that. I've known people for the last 78 years. I have to run through everybody I ever met and think about something. Oh, I'm more private than him. I'm more private than her. Am I very, very private?
Well, I don't want you to do that. I'm just saying when I ask the question, what's kind of your general response to it when you hear it?
My general response is, I can't compare.
Okay.
All right, our case this week, if you haven't figured it out yet, is Robert Durst. Truly fascinating character, possible serial killer, definite murderer for sure. Yeah. But just a very interesting person. I mean, multi-millionaire from birth. His family's worth billions, and we'll go through all that. But first, let's talk about the study sources that we used for this case. I went all out this week. I told you guys on the last Patreon that the next one was going to be a big one and that I wanted to really go crazy on it.
You did.
So I got a 10-hour book called A Deadly Secret, The Bizarre and Chilling Story of Robert Durst by Matt Birkbeck that was made in 2015, the same year that the HBO docuseries that we got for this case. Of course, we had to watch the Jinx, a 6-part series from HBO that was also put out in 2015. This case just like went worldwide in 2015, even though it was always like a big deal in New York City, I'm sure, and like people that paid attention to crime and things like that. But like, yeah, this went mainstream in 2015 with the Jinx's release.
Amazing documentary.
Because it was just a truly compelling docuseries. Yeah, it's really well done. Of course, HBO. I want to say it was done, it was done elsewhere and then HBO bought the rights to it.
Oh, okay.
I don't know how much they had to do with the actual making of it, but nonetheless, they know how to pick content.
No doubt.
And it was truly compelling. And we talked a little bit about this before we started recording. It had what a lot of great docuseries or documentaries had, in that they had some luck on their side and stuff happened during the making of it that they didn't expect that made it that much more compelling. Like the letter that they matched later on, we'll talk about. But like that was just pure luck.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, to be fair, this documentary was going.
They basically broke an old murder case. They actually solved it, on the docuseries. It's crazy.
Yeah. It's just good timing. Like you said, just sometimes it works like that. But I mean, the fact that they had to take so long on this docuseries, though, it really did help. And I mean, and then Robert didn't really help it a lot. He kind of strung them along quite a bit. And that kind of helped buy them time.
Oh, yeah. I'm in Barcelona. Meanwhile, he's in California.
Right. It's just some of the little stunts that he pulled throughout the thing. I'm like, wow. All in all, that kind of fucked things up because if he was in town and he finished this docuseries at the time he was supposed to, maybe all this damning evidence doesn't even come out. But the fact that he was trying to be a little sneaky and kind of be, a little shady with the director, it kind of played in the director's favor. It bought him enough time to find some shit to really question him about, which was pretty interesting.
Honestly, one of the funniest moments I've over the course of however many 200 plus episodes we've recorded, one of the absolute funniest moments was in this case when he stole a fucking sandwich and some Band-Aids and got busted.
I know, right? He's rich.
Oh my God, bro. Like, it's just like the motherfucker had $500 in his pocket and like 40 G's in the trunk of his car, and he steals like 3 Band-Aids and a fucking $6 sandwich and gets busted, ends up going down for murder from that. Like,
he just didn't like being told no, man.
I think he was just looking for a little thrill. I think like he said, it was just like, wanted to see if he could get away with it. I don't know, pushing the boundaries.
I think he had a little bit of mental disorder as well. A little bit of, you know what I mean? He was a little bit disoriented at times, maybe even borderline schizophrenic.
Yeah, he was actually semi-diagnosed with schizophrenia when he was young. We'll talk about that. So let's get into the case.
All right.
We have much to talk about. We will discuss Mr. Durst's weirdness throughout the next 2 hours, possibly. So Robert Allen Durst was born April 12th, 1943, and shares a birthday with Ed O'Neill, David Letterman, and Tom Clancy. And this was another one of those that situations on thefamouspeople.com or whatever one I was on that just annoyed the shit out of me, because I was scrolling. I'm like, there's nobody famous in here. Like, this is all 15-year-old TikTok stars. And then, wait, there's David Letterman at number 24.
Wow.
Ed O'Neill at like 30, beneath a bunch of 15-year-olds. But nonetheless, a great group. Ed O'Neill is a fascinating character himself. He was obviously Al Bundy and Married with Children, but he's also been a black belt in jiu-jitsu for ages. He started with the Gracies in the early 90s, and I don't think a lot of people know that.
I did not know that. Wow.
How unassuming is he, like you would never expect him to be a world-class badass, but yeah.
Wow, that makes...
So you just never know who you're fucking with. Don't start any fights with somebody in grocery store parking lot when you don't know.
Oh, exactly. You can't just size people up anymore. Yeah. Especially if they're a black belt in jiu-jitsu.
Dude, there's honestly like a lot of borderline fat dudes that are really, really badass in jiu-jitsu, and they use that like it's a nightmare when you roll with a guy who's like a purple or brown belt, and they're like 250, most of it in their belly. They got a big beer belly or whatever. Yeah. They will put that weight on you, and it's like a car's parked on you. You can't breathe. Like, it's horrible.
Oh God. Yeah, I bet, dude.
So you just never know who you're fucking with. Like I said, it might be some dude with a big belly at the grocery store with flip-flops on and somehow annoys you. Don't go starting a fight with him.
Next thing you know, you're getting suffocated.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so but also David Letterman and Tom Clancy, who wrote some notable novels over the years.
Yes,
Tom Clancy.
Yeah, and he's responsible for a lot of pretty cool games. Rainbow Six.
Yeah,
right. Rainbow Six, Splinter Cell. I think
wasn't it like Splinter Cell and shit like that.
Yeah, they were hot for a minute until Call of Duty just blew them off the map.
Right. Yeah. So Robert was the first of 4 children born to Seymour and Bernice Durst, and as the firstborn son to a family of moguls and a dynasty like the Durst family is, he should have been the heir to the dynasty. He should have been the patriarch, if you will. He should have been the one to take over.
Exactly.
And being the eldest son, and he didn't, for many reasons that we'll discuss later on. But that played into his psyche later on. He had younger brothers named Douglas and Tommy, and a younger sister named Wendy. Tommy and Wendy kind of fly under the radar throughout this case and throughout the docuseries, The Jinx, whereas Douglas he's whether he likes it or not, he is a center point of this docuseries. He would rather not be, obviously.
Well, but he's the heir of the company, so he really doesn't have a choice.
He is.
He's kind of the star.
He's in the limelight. Yeah, you don't get it. Yeah, exactly. You got to deal with that. That's part of the game. The game that you took on when you became the guy for the Durst family, in one of the biggest real estate mogul families in New York City.
And early on, he became Robert's nemesis, his sibling nemesis. So that's why he will forever be part of Robert Durst's story. And I think he's a huge part of it, no doubt. As much as he wants to, say he has nothing to do with it, it's like, bro, you're everything. Whether you intentionally did it or not.
I think, what, this is what really I think annoys the general public and the middle and lower classes of society, and I can speak from experience on this, where it's like what annoys us the most, I think, about these billionaires and people like this that are just so privileged, is that they don't like inconvenience, and they just completely wipe it off the map for themselves. And like that was part of Robert's vibe too. It's like the I just didn't want to be inconvenienced. So like he lied to the police initially, and he even admitted to it later about his wife's disappearance, and said that he went to his neighbors to drink and stuff. He's like, I just didn't want him to come bother me.
Yeah.
Your wife is missing. You don't want to be bothered. Doug, you're a billionaire and you have all the power in the world. You're one of the biggest figures in New York City, but you don't want to be bothered and ask questions. That also billionaires, I don't want to pay taxes. Like they find loopholes to not pay an amount that they wouldn't even notice is gone from their account.
Right.
Like it's insignificant, but it would make a big difference to society if they just paid what we pay. I'm not asking for them to pay more than what we pay, a higher percentage. A lot of people ask for that. I'm just saying pay the same percentage we pay, 30%.
Yeah.
And it'll amount to millions and millions of dollars that go into the school system and the roads and all of that shit.
Yep.
They find ways to get in offshore accounts, and they don't even pay that. They just don't want any inconvenience, but they basically want their cake and they want to eat it too all the fucking time.
Yep.
And I think that's what annoys the majority of society so much. And you see it on display with the Durst family throughout this case, where they just like, I just didn't want to be inconvenienced.
Exactly.
It's like, fuck you, really, honestly.
And also the pity parties.
A woman is possibly murdered, most likely murdered here, and you just can't be in. It was your fucking sister-in-law or your daughter-in-law, when you talk about Seymour Durst, but they couldn't be bothered. They're too busy.
Right. And it's the pity party too that Robert throws for himself. Oh, poor pitiful me. Like I didn't get the heir to my throne, blah, blah, blah. I didn't get it's like, you're still fucking rich. You can literally, like, if I had a fraction of the money that you have, I could start literally anything. I could start any type of business.
And not only that, he never even had any interest. He never had any interest in the real estate business. That's another thing. Yeah. It's like, bro, you didn't show any. It's like, oh, I didn't get this promotion. It's like, well, you didn't even show any interest in it to begin with until it came time for, the job to be given. It's like this other person was going out of their way to like shadow that job and this and that. And it's like, you didn't want it until you saw the other person was getting it, like a dog with a bone type of thing.
Yes, yes.
He was off running his health food store and shit. And it's like, of course they're not going to give that job to you, bro. Like you didn't put in on it.
Right. You
had every opportunity in the world.
You literally started another venture instead. Like what do you expect them? Which is fine. Yeah. If he would have just been like, no, this is what I want to do. I want to run my own empire. I want to start this. That's fine too. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. But he felt like that, that wasn't good enough either. It was never good enough for Robert Durst.
Yeah. Yeah. So, as we mentioned, he was born, the first of 4 children born. He had 2 younger brothers and a younger sister, and he was born into one of the richest and most influential families in New York City, which is, one of the world's most famous and important cities.
Oh, no
especially
doubt.
In this time period.
Just to be one of the most richest
his grandfather,
families in
Joseph,
New York is impressive. Like, Jesus.
Oh, yeah.
They own property on
his
like
grandfather,
the main streets, like 3rd Street, 4th Street.
Oh, they own several skyscrapers in Manhattan and in downtown New York City.
Insane.
Prime real estate. Mm-hmm. Some of basically imagine like Boardwalk on Monopoly. Like those are the properties they own.
Exactly.
Park Place and Boardwalk.
Exactly. All blue properties.
And all the greens probably too.
Of course. Why not?
Yeah, we're stuck with the purple. We got Mediterranean Avenue or whatever. So his grandfather Joseph Durst he made all of this happen. He was what we talked about earlier, where you're born with nothing and you build an empire. Mm-hmm. Joseph Durst was that. I mean, he made all this possible for his heir apparents. He was born to a Jewish family and immigrated to the U.S. from Austria-Hungary in 1902 with $3 to his name. It's pretty crazy to think that this family started out with $3.
Well, I mean, $3
came to
$3 in 1902. I mean, you could probably live a month off $3 in 1902, right? I don't know.
Yeah, let's call it $5,000 then, I guess, in today's dollars. He comes to still fucking amazing to turn that into billions.
Yeah, it is still amazing. It's
like me and you both have far more than what he showed up with, and there's no way we're ever going to be worth billions.
Right. I got you. That's a good point.
So he worked as a tailor in New York City in 1912 and became a full partner in the dress manufacturer Durst and Rubin. And using the profits from his business, he invested in real estate, purchasing his first building in 1915 called the Century Building. But this was only the start, as he continued to expand his impressive prime real estate portfolio. In 1927, he formed the Durst Organization, where he continued to play a role in the building of several large skyscrapers in Manhattan and other prime real estate in New York City. And in 1973, Joseph Durst died, and his son Seymour took control of the company during the real estate crash of the 1970s. Now, imagine if you have as much money as they had at that point, the real estate crash could actually be a great opportunity to pick up more real estate if you have the cash flow.
Yep.
If you have the money in the bank to be able to purchase it basically for peanuts, you know?
Mm-hmm. And I'm sure that's what they were doing.
Yep. And from there, the Durst family became one of the most established and prominent real estate families in New York City in the 20th century. In 2010, the Durst organization bid on and won the right to invest $100 million into the One World Trade Center development, becoming a co-developer with the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey. So obviously that's where the Twin Towers were, and they now there's the One World Trade Center development. It's a memory and a beautiful building to commemorate
and see
the tragic events of 9/11.
And that shows how much money they have, because in 2010, that was during the recession. 2008, 2010, that was a rough time to buy real estate. I mean, well, a good time to buy real estate, rather, I guess, but no one could buy it.
To develop it.
No one was buying or developing real estate at that time. Everybody was stopping. And then here they are building the One World Trade Center. So that just lets you know the wealth and how deep it runs in that family.
Yep. So the Durst organization continues to be owned and operated by the third generation of the Durst family, owning and managing more than 8.5 million square feet of Class A office space in Midtown Manhattan and over 1 million square feet of luxury residential rentals.
Damn.
As per Forbes, the family as a whole is worth approximately $8.1 billion.
It's not bad.
Jesus.
Not bad.
No, not bad at all. But as for Robert Durst, he had a quote about the family wealth and its impact on him. He says, quote, "All my life I've had more money than I could spend, and it didn't make me happy."
That's because you've had it all your life.
So,
I mean, that's just a human condition, bro. You had it your whole life. You can't appreciate it. It's almost impossible.
It bypasses our natural reward systems that we have in place, which is to work for things and to feel rewarded when we achieve them, even if it's just a day, even as far back as, caveman times or Middle Ages, whatever, just surviving on a daily basis was super rewarding because it was hard, but when you're born with that silver spoon in your mouth and you've never had to get anything for yourself, it's just there.
Right.
It's got to be a struggle. There's just no doubt about it.
Now let's play the other hand here. On the other hand, you don't get credit for anything that you do as this person either. Now that's
another thing.
Now that's a price that I would not want to pay. I think about it all the time. I'm like, man, it'd be nice to be born rich. But then I think about the way people would perceive me, and I'm like, I don't know if that's worth it. I'd be so unapproachable. And like I said, anything in my life would always come with an asterisk beside it. They'd be like, yeah, he did that, but he was born rich. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You literally get credit for nothing. Nothing.
Yeah.
So you can see how that could drive someone crazy, especially someone as prideful as Robert Durst.
Mm-hmm. He reminds me a bit of DuPont from the Foxcatcher episode.
Much. I was going to bring that up. Yes, absolutely.
The way they carry themselves, the way that they talk, their motivations in life, those type of things.
Yes.
But I actually respected DuPont a bit more because he was trying to find something that money couldn't buy, which was achievement in hard athletics and things like that. I think that's one avenue to go down. If people don't respect you for what you've done, it's you have to find something that money doesn't. Wrestling. Wrestling is a perfect example. It doesn't matter how much money you have. You get on the mat with a real wrestler, you're going to get fucked up.
Right.
So trying to find something along those lines that money doesn't help you.
That makes you an equal.
May have helped Robert if he could have found something like that. I don't know.
Yeah, probably. But so similar, and they're both so cold and disconnected and almost grown up children. You know how when they asked,
but looking for an identity as well. They're both searching for an identity. They're searching for their place in life, and they're looking for respect.
Yeah.
And finding it hard to get.
Yes. And they both blame early childhood trauma for the rest of their life. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? It's they almost get locked in at that time. Because, Robert talked about how he was only happy when he was 7 years old, which we'll talk about here coming up. But, before his mother's death. And it's he never really moved on from that. He always kind of had that childhood mindset of, well, poor pitiful me. My mom's gone. At least I'm going to do what I want to do.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. So as you briefly brought up, Robert seemed to only be happy from what I could gather from studying him extensively and hearing a lot of his personal testimony throughout the docuseries, it seemed like he was only happy for 2 brief moments in life. His early childhood prior to his mother's death, so like the first 7 years of his life,
Right.
and then the early years of his first marriage. But let's talk about, early years and what happened with his mom. So,
Right.
You see a lot of footage of him. I get the feeling that he was a mama's boy to the max. Like he was the sensitive one of the children.
Right.
Douglas, it seemed like from a young age, they had a sibling rivalry. Douglas seemed to be kind of like a cutthroat businessman. Just he was made to be one of the Dursts, like he cut from the same cloth as his grandfather, perhaps.
Well, yeah. And Robert says
was going to get what he wanted.
Robert claimed that, the decision for Doug to take over the family business was made very early. He thinks it was made like during their childhood. Maybe he felt that type of favoritism, maybe from his father towards Doug, and so he naturally latched on to his mother. And then when his mother left, he was like, well, shit, now this ain't fair. I don't have a parent speaking in my corner anymore. I'm not the favorite of anyone anymore. And so the enemy is now Doug.
Yeah. Maybe he just gravitated to his mom from the get-go, and Douglas gravitated towards the men in the family, and they just kind of early on decided maybe he was right. Maybe they decided like Douglas is the one.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. Parents tend to do
that. We can't hand this empire off to little mama's boy, Robert, over there.
Right. And parents tend to do that, man. Parents do that from the time their children are born. They're like, oh, look at him. He's got long legs. He'll probably be a good runner like his dad. I'm like, what the hell? He's a baby. Like, you don't know what the fuck. This kid could trip at 5 and like be incapacitated.
They're going to morph a lot from the time they're a baby.
Yes. Don't put those.
They're going to go through stages. And
don't put those predictions on your children out of the womb, much less and then not even as children. People change so much.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, so let's get to the traumatic death of his mother. One night in 1950, when Robert was only 7 years old, his father woke him. This is his story, by the way, because it varies. Like his brothers say one thing, Robert says another. There's like at least 3 different stories from what I can tell. One of them had, like the book told the tale of Robert standing in the driveway and watching his mother fall from the roof. Another, was the docuseries painted a portrait of him standing in the hallway of like the second floor of their house and watching out the window as, waving to his mom. I get the feeling that Robert's story, it makes sense to me. It's like the father was concerned about his wife's state of being, the mother of his children's state of being, and that she was on the roof and she wasn't responding and she wanted to stay up there and she was maybe going to jump. And so he tries to bring her back by getting her eldest son to wave to her and be like, look, you have something to live for type of thing.
Yes, that's what I thought too.
That makes the vibe sense. I got. Yeah, so that's his story, is that he was woken up by his father in the middle of the night. He was brought to a window where his mom could see him from the roof that she was standing on in her nightgown and told to wave to mommy. So he waves to her, and then he seems is sent back to bed by his father, at which point his mother later falls or jumps off the roof. And that's, by the time that happens, the fire department has arrived and they're going up a ladder attempting to get her down. And basically the firefighter reaches out as she's falling off and only gets a hold of a piece of her nightgown, and she falls head first to the ground. Basically, I'm not sure if she died on impact, but died shortly after. It's hard to rule out suicide in this. She was on some heavy medication apparently. This could have been some sort of a psychosis, sleepwalking event.
Right.
I'm not sure what was going on.
I mean, it could be. And people do some crazy sleepwalking, man. It's amazing what people can do asleep. There's videos all over the internet now, people who have security cameras in their home, and they're like, check out me last night walking into the kitchen and, making a cup of water and a sandwich. And they're like, I don't remember any of this. So it's not out of the question that someone could have gotten up on the roof. Because from all of these stories, there was never any indication that the mother acknowledged them. Right? She never waved back. She never looked at him. She never came out of her psychosis, for sure. Like the book said that she was talking back and forth with Seymour, her husband, and with even with the fire department. She was saying I'm fine. I'm okay. Just let me be, type of thing. Mm-hmm.
And she didn't want to come down. And apparently when it came time to come down, when the fire department were on the verge of getting to her, she decided to either jump or fell. I'm not sure, but she had apparently had quite a bit of asthma medication in her system, like a lethal amount or an overdose amount of asthma medication.
Okay.
And the Brooklyn Eagle article that was written about it on November 9th, 1950, described her death as a suicide. Quote, more than a dozen policemen and firemen had gone to the Durst home after an employee in the house had notified police that Mrs. Durst had managed to climb out onto the roof, the newspaper reported. Then fireman Thomas Langan climbed to the top of the ladder, reaching to the roof. As he did so, Mrs. Durst flung herself from the roof and plunged past him. He grabbed her bathrobe as she fell, seized it temporarily, but the weight of her body pulled it from his grasp. And yeah, she would die there in their driveway. It says she was rushed in an ambulance to the White Plains Hospital. She was declared dead on arrival. It's unclear whether it was suicide or accident.
But she most likely died from the fall. I mean,
oh yeah, she was. It sounds like she was dead in the paramedic ride already.
Yeah, obviously they were just trying to get her body off of the premises as soon as possible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There was an interesting Robert's thoughts on this and the aftermath of it were interesting. He in the documentary series, The Jinx, discourages anyone watching the series from having their young children attend their parents' funeral if they are so unfortunate as to have their parents die at when they're young age. He describes not fully understanding why his mommy was in a box and why it was being lowered into the ground. He says that he attempted to jump onto the casket and had to be pulled off as mommy was being lowered into the ground. It's pretty fucked up. I mean, whether you obviously Durst is a terrible murderer, we come to find out, but still, like, it's a terrible scene to imagine.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And he says that everyone was coming up to him and saying, "Mommy's going to be fine. She's going to be right here." And he's like, "What do you mean right here? In the ground? Like that? She's not fine then if she's in the ground in a box." And
right,
you can see how his 7-year-old mind would find that hard to comprehend for sure.
No doubt. Mm.
Yeah,
now there was no one else to confirm this story though, a fact of him jumping on the box. I remember in the documentary they interviewed somebody else who happened to be on this, and he was like, "I don't remember it quite like that."
Right.
I can't remember if they were speaking to his brother. I think maybe he was speaking to his brother or maybe an aunt or uncle, and they talked about how I don't know when the director of the Jinx mentioned the fact that Robert jumped on the casket, they were kind of like, maybe. I don't really remember it like that. And that's odd. That seems like something you would certainly remember. And then if it didn't happen, why would you say it? It could have been playing
out in his head. It could have been playing out in his mind, this scenario.
Exactly.
But in reality, he was just standing there.
Exactly. That's what I'm wondering.
Yeah. Yeah. So following his mother's death, Robert began running away to be alone every chance he got. He would run away from school. He would run away from home. And on several occasions, he had to be returned by police. So just trying to escape reality, it sounds like.
Yeah, but this doesn't seem too crazy for this point in time of his life. He just lost his mother. Like he doesn't want to be around. I'm sure everything feels different. He doesn't feel the same love from his father and from the rest of his family. Mm-hmm. This kind of makes sense here. It just seems like a young adolescent boy who's just, trying to figure out a place that he
really
belongs.
Needed his mom and didn't have her anymore.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So as children, we briefly mentioned that they had him and his brother had a sibling rivalry. They underwent counseling for sibling rivalry in 1953, and a psychiatrist report on 10-year-old Robert mentioned personality decomposition and possible schizophrenia.
Man, and that's in 1953. So you kind of brought that up earlier.
Yeah.
So
for sure.
If they were saying
back when they rarely actually diagnosed anything other than like, he'll be all right.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. The fact that they gave him possible schizophrenia in 1953, I feel like that's a guaranteed schizophrenia diagnosis nowadays. And you can't ignore the twitches that he has, right? The tics.
Yeah, I wondered if that was something that came about as an older person, or if he always had that.
No,
I know you could tell that he had hearing issues because, like, when the director of the Jinx was talking to him, he would kind of like turn his head.
Yeah,
I think it was like his right ear he could hear better out of, and he would turn his head to hear that. But that's just part of age. But he definitely did have some sort of a tic with it, where he would blink a lot. And Yeah.
See, I thought that too until I saw a scene in the documentary. It was one of the earlier episodes. I want to say it was maybe 2 or 3. And he is poolside, and he's a kid, and he's standing there, and it's filmed. It's video. It's not the best quality, obviously. But he is standing there beside the pool, and he's making the same facial expressions, Lauren. He's doing like this one eye wink thing, and he's got like one side of his face is like tensing up and then loosening, and at first I thought, oh, maybe it's because he's out of the pool and he's got water dripping in his eyes. But he did it for so long while they were talking over it. I thought, oh my God, man, he's had this since a kid. So
interesting.
If you go back and check, if you just scan through the documentary and look for scenes where he's standing by the pool, there's a little home video where he gets out of the pool and he's just standing there as a kid. He's probably 7, 8 years old, and he's doing those exact facial expressions. He's doing those same tics.
How do you not think of John DuPont too? Didn't DuPont have that same sort of thing?
He did. Like, I would say light Tourette's, maybe. Maybe that's why they were giving him schizophrenia. Maybe he just had like a moderate case of Tourette's.
I don't know. We obviously can't diagnose what he had going on, but he was
obviously
a very complicated individual.
No doubt.
So he attended Scarsdale High School, and classmates described him as a loner. It's not surprising.
No.
He would go on, however, to earn a bachelor's degree in economics in 1965 from Lehigh University, where he was a member of the varsity lacrosse team and a business manager of the student newspaper, the Brown and White. He would then go on to enroll in the doctoral program at UCLA later that year, where he met a woman who was pivotal in his life, a woman who would basically be the Robin to his Batman for a long time and help him get away with crimes and things along those lines.
Yeah.
Susan Berman, who had a similar upbringing to him. I want to briefly mention before we move on from the UCLA thing, I believe he told his family that he had gotten his doctoral degree at UCLA when in fact he did not. Just to briefly mention that, like he told them that he had several other degrees that he didn't have. As far as I know, he just had that bachelor's in economics that he got in 1965, and then farted around in school and never actually got his degrees further more than that.
Okay.
But something very important happened at UCLA, and that was him meeting Susan Berman, who him and her were thick as thieves from then on out.
Yeah.
She was a journalist and author, and she, like Bob, had a lavish childhood. She was born also with a silver spoon in her mouth, as she was the daughter of a known mobster, Davy Berman, who played a role in organized crime in Las Vegas. We always have a mention of North Carolina or Las Vegas, and of course,
there we go.
We got our Las Vegas mention here. David Berman was an organized crime figure active in New York City, Minneapolis, and Las Vegas. I believe he was a part of Murder, Inc., which we've talked about before.
Yes. Oh, wow. I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah. So Susan Berman, her father, David Berman, was one of the pioneers of casino gambling in Las Vegas, where he was a partner with Bugsy Siegel at the Flamingo Hotel. So yeah, she grew up in that. She says that she didn't learn that her father. She knew her father was an important man, and they had wealth, and they were always in the limelight and stuff. But she didn't realize for what reason until she was like, I want to say either in high school or college, when one of her friends mentioned a book.
She was 21
with her father in it, and she picked up the book. What'd she say? She was 21?
She was 21 when she found out that her father was a mobster.
Holy shit.
That's crazy, right?
Yeah, I'm not really sure what Daddy does, but he has a lot of money and people seem to like him a lot. Anywhere we go, people know him and want to be around him.
Yeah, people are always super nice to us.
Yeah.
They're always buying our dinners.
Yeah, and you could go one of two ways when you find this out. And Susan definitely went in the direction of like loving the fact that her dad was a mobster and was obsessed with the fact that her dad was a mobster and began writing books about it and things like that. So
how do you not, right?
She loved that image.
Yeah. I mean,
yeah.
Honestly, at 21 years old, it's like, well, shit, why not? Why not? It's
especially if you loved your dad and he was really good to you and everything, and you saw that soft side of him, then it'd kind of be cool to hear that he was also a badass, I guess.
And also there's something slightly more lovable about organized crime than there is regular crime. They're not quite as cruel. They're not quite as ruthless. I mean, they are, but they're ruthless with people who are in that world already.
They usually you only cross their path if you were not, I wouldn't say asking for it, but the risk you take on getting involved with organized crime.
Exactly.
And there's a pretty high chance you're gonna get whacked at some point or go down.
Right.
And be put in prison or
That's what I like about organized crime is like these guys aren't out just terrorizing neighborhoods for no reason or just innocent people.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? Like you said, most of the people that are involved with them, they knew what they were getting involved with from square one. And you had to face the circumstances.
Yeah. So Susan became a longtime friend and confidant of Bobby Durst. You could honestly say it's like he was his best friend for a long time. Someone that he could call, and she would understand his circumstances, his situation because of her background.
Right.
And she's believed to have helped him cover up his crimes later on, and we'll talk more about that. But Robert would eventually withdraw from UCLA and return to New York in 1969. And in the fall of 1971, Robert met who would go on end up being his first wife, Kathleen McCormack. She was a dental hygienist at the time. She was working in New York City while he was visiting New York City from Vermont. And they hit it off right away, and they were truly in love early on. And it was not the match that Kathy's family had hoped for. Kathy was raised Catholic, and Robert was raised Jewish, and their early relationship, them moving in together, was that was totally against Kathy's family's kind of set of of morals.
Right.
And,
that's the strict Catholic beliefs right there, man. Yeah, you don't move together before marriage, no sex before marriage. You know what I'm saying? If you're going to drink, you have to do it in private. That's how Catholics are.
Yeah.
Very strict.
It's really unfortunate that Kathy met Bob of all people, because
isn't it? She's such a lovable person.
By all accounts, she was just a really great person. Yeah, like really fun to be around. She was really beautiful and just full of life and headed on the right path already. She was in medical school, and she's already a dental hygienist, and like she's doing really well for herself. And then she finds this guy who's an heir to a billionaire family, and just thinks he's above other people, and ultimately starts abusing her. And what we believe is that he ends up killing her as well.
Yes.
But early on, they just had something, man. She apparently thought he was cute in his own way, and obviously came from money. I'm sure that drew her in a little bit too, knowing that there was security there financially, that he could help her go through school and things like that.
Right.
And after only 2 dates, Bob would invite her back to his home in Vermont, where together they would open a health food store. So they move in together really early on, and they open this health food store in Vermont. She moved there in January of 1972. And we talked about it a little bit earlier, but Robert at this time had no interest in working for his father at the Durst organization. And that's a big part of why his younger brother Doug would end up taking over as the guy in the Durst organization. It's because he was there showing interest in learning the business. And meanwhile, Robert's off running a health food store in Vermont.
And he's 30.
What did you think was going to happen?
Robert's 30. You're 30 years old and you still haven't shown any interest in the business? Okay, then. Well, I guess we'll move on. What are they supposed to do? Yeah. Wait on you to sow all your wild oats and do all the shit you want to do until you're like retirement age, and then they give it to you? I don't understand this.
Right.
Crazy.
And let's be clear, there was nothing wrong with him running if that's what made him happy with it, which it really did seem to. He was very happy early in his marriage.
Oh yeah,
with Kathy running the health food store. They both seemed happy with that lifestyle.
Yep.
He always loved nature. Robert did. Like you can see him. He always flees to like areas that are beautiful, coastal cities, woodsy areas. He always flees to these areas. And in Vermont, running this health food store, they would go on nature hikes every day, him and Kathy, and they were happy.
Yep.
And maybe they should have just kept doing that. But Robert got drawn back into the family business by his father, Seymour. Seymour Durst pressured Robert into resettling into New York and working for the Durst organization, as Seymour was getting to his book was coming to an end. He was very, very old at this point. He knew he wasn't going to be around much longer. And one of his last wishes was for Robert to get back involved with the Durst family, business. And he's ultimately able to talk Robert into coming back to New York City, selling the store that they had called All Good Things. That was the health food store. And there's actually a movie, Hollywood film made with Ryan Gosling and Kirsten Dunst later on that we'll talk about, that was called All Good Things, which is the name of their health food store.
Brilliant.
So Robert and Kathy, they closed All Good Things store in 1973, and they moved to Manhattan. Robert returned, where they would get married on April 12th, 1973, on Robert's 30th birthday.
Oh, wow.
So
how convenient.
They've their life has changed course. They're back in New York City, and I'm sure Robert was miserable working in the Durst organization because he was now, I'm sure, was playing second or third fiddle to his brothers, because it wasn't just Doug. It was also his other younger brother who was doing quite well in the family business. They all had their roles, but Robert comes in after doing, living off in Vermont and doing his own thing, and I'm sure he was just kind of a joke to them,
Right.
He was just there.
Well, even if he wasn't, they're probably going like, "Oh, now you're trying to come in and get some shit when Dad's leaving." Like,
we know what you're trying to do.
Even though his dad was the one that brought him back. That's kind of crazy that his dad called and asked for him to come back. But at the same time, you have to imagine the Durst Corporation is probably paying Robert anyways. Right? He's probably got some bullshit title even when he lives and runs this store in Vermont. So you can see the father's, his conflict with this. He's thinking, well, I'm paying him anyways. I might as well have him working for the company. Don't you want to work for the company, Robert? Don't you want to come and let me get some work out of you while I'm paying you at least?
Well, I'm sure he was also in that. He was probably also in that reflective stage of his life where you see your life ending soon. And you look at maybe the time lost that you could have had with your family. Maybe he just wanted his son around for the last years of his life.
Fair enough.
Even if he wasn't doing anything for the business, maybe he just wanted to look and see his dynasty that he was leaving to his sons, and just wanted Robert around. Maybe that was part of it. I don't know.
Yeah, I could see that too.
You see this often with older men where they go and like, what did I do? Like, I spent all this time and I lost all those years I had with family, and now they're trying to like get every second they can with family because they worked too much when they were younger.
Dude, I'm seeing that with my grandfather now, and it's a hard thing to deal with. It's nowhere near on this type of scale, but you can tell.
You start to realize what's really important.
Yes, and I think he realizes that he has people over all the time. He's always wanting people to come over and visit and talk, and it's tough, man, when you hit that end of the life. You're right. Maybe his father was going through that. Yeah. That's a good point.
Yeah. So in 1992, it became official, and Seymour Durst broke tradition and appointed Robert Durst's younger brother Douglas to take over the organization in 1992. And Robert, who felt he was entitled to inherit the company despite the disdain for it, accused and blamed his brother Douglas for stealing what he believed he was owned, which caused a rift between Robert and the rest of the Durst family. And we see later on, Robert would have several feeble attempts at taking out his brother, it seems. And Douglas would have to hire private security to basically surround him all the time because his older brother was trying to cut him out of the equation.
Yep. Restraining orders and all the like.
Yep. Yeah. Now, them deciding on Doug may have also had something to do with the fact that Robert had really put their family, the Dursts, into headlines over the previous years because Kathy, Robert's wife, had been missing, and they had been all over the headlines, with possible allegations that Robert had done something to her. Because in the late 70s and early 80s, Robert and Kathy's marriage had began to fall apart. It had this downward spiraled into substance abuse and physical abuse on the part of Bob towards Kathy. Kathy may have played a role as also of hitting Bob, who knows, but they'd had these drunken all-out fights. And I'm not sure, it didn't seem like Robert was really much of a drinker. He loved marijuana. He was an avid marijuana smoker on a daily basis.
Yeah.
But Kathy, I think just due to the fact of her unhappiness with their relationship and the way that her life was going, had began to consume a lot of alcohol and also allegedly cocaine on a frequent basis as well. And it just comes down to the fact that they weren't happy anymore. And Kathy, I think Bob described it as he was the dominant in their relationship early on, and Kathy had accepted that role, but over time she had grown tired of it and began to lash out to him. And then at which point it was like one time he pushed her down, and then it just from there he learned that he could get away with that, and he just started hitting her on a regular basis.
Right. Yeah, there were multiple times that she was treated in hospitals for bruises, especially on her face and whatnot, and she never pushed any charges or anything.
Yeah. And I think their relationship was all but over following 1976 when Kathy became pregnant, even though she was on birth control. And Bob had told her from the onset of their relationship that he didn't want kids.
Yeah.
When she disclosed to him that she was pregnant, he told her that if she has the baby, they were getting divorced. So she ended up having an abortion so that, their marriage could stay intact. And she was understandably upset about this, not wanting to give her baby up. As far as Robert goes, he had a quote that ended up being the name of the docuseries. He says, quote, "I didn't want kids around. Somehow I thought I'd be a jinx." And the filmmaker says, you might be a jinx for them. And he says, "Yeah, I knew I'd be a bad father," which he's probably not wrong about.
No, he's not wrong. And I think you should listen to people when they say this as well, Like, it sucks that Kathy had to go through an abortion with this man, but if she really wanted kids and he didn't, that should have been a separating point right there. You know what I'm saying?
I was going to say, she didn't have to. She could have left him and had the kid, and Bob would have been forced to provide financially, although you just wonder.
Oh, that wasn't going to happen.
He would have just gotten rid of her even sooner, while she was pregnant. I'm sure that would have been the outcome.
Yep, no doubt.
There was also Bob's behavior towards Kathy's family. She was very close to her family. They were good, normal people. Too normal and boring for Robert Durst, some would say. On the rare occasions that he would even attend Kathy's family functions, he would treat them as though they were below him. He wouldn't give them the time of day. They would try to be friendly with him and learn about him, and he just had no time for it. And that's one easy way to grow a wedge between you and your spouse, is to not show their family any respect, to not show any interest in their family, and not try to assimilate with them in their family. It is really, it can really fuck a marriage up.
Or a
relationship.
Yes, it can. Because those are the people they come from. And if you tell someone you don't like the people they come from, that's tough. That's a hard thing to deal with. And I know people change, and a lot of people don't relate to their families later in life, but still, it's still something in there.
Yeah, I mean, I know my wife loves her family, and she looks forward to those, occasions where she gets to see them and hang out with them, whether it's holidays or whatever. And if you, as a selfish spouse of them, ruin that day they have and just make it miserable for them, something they're looking forward to, it can really create resentment and things like that. And that's what Bobby was doing. Every time she would get to see her family, he'd just ruin it for her.
Yep.
And it drove a wedge even further between them.
Yep. There's no way it can.
Real quick, Michael, I want to talk about something that's helped me with this podcast lately to be more productive in studying for this show, and that is Magic Mind. I don't know about you, but oftentimes when I should be working on the podcast, I get sidetracked, staring at my phone, looking at Twitter, whatever I'm doing. That has not been as much of an issue lately since I found Magic Mind. Rather than hammering a pot of coffee all morning long, I do 1 cup of coffee and then I do my Magic Mind, and it's helped me stay right on track. It's helped me hammer through these crime lines that we do for this podcast. I also feel like it makes me more creative. Magic Mind is the world's first productivity shot. Each shot contains a magical combination of 12 active ingredients designed to stimulate focus, creativity, energy, and motivation while decreasing stress, oxidation, and decreases post-exercise inflammation in the body. I've found that this shot improves my mornings so much. I love that I can take it anywhere and drink it wherever I need to. Usually I have my coffee and then I follow it up with a Magic Mind shot. And I've found that I'm more productive, I'm more clear-headed, I'm able to focus on what I need to focus on, and my energy levels maintained through the day as opposed to that crash you get after having multiple cups of coffee. Some of the magic ingredients inside Magic Mind shots is matcha, lion's mane, cordyceps mushrooms, among others. I actually shared some of my Magic Mind with my mom because she struggles with some of the same things with staying focused on tasks and getting sidetracked, and she's seen some amazing results as well. Seeing how well it works for me, I would really encourage you to try it out as well if you're having trouble being 100% some days. It's a total game changer. The Magic Mind team created a super offer for me to share with you guys. You get up to 56% off your first subscription in the next 10 days and 20% off your one-time purchase with True Crime Guys 20 as your code. You can get it at magicmind.co/truecrimeguys and redeem the discount code TrueCrimeGuys20. But hurry up, the 56% discount only lasts 10 days from the airing of this episode. Once again, go to magicmind.co/truecrimeguys and the code is TrueCrimeGuys20. You got 10 days to get that 56% off your subscription. And so throughout the last few years of their marriage, Bob regularly hit and thrashed around Kathy, and he admitted to this in the docuseries. He couldn't even remember when it started, but he knew that he was regularly abusing her.
Yeah. Well, he described it as they were fighting. He's like, it was a push and shove type of fight. That's how he would describe it. He would lead us to believe that Kathy was also abusing him.
Which she may very well have been striking him as well.
Yeah, maybe.
It may have been a mutual thing, but, obviously he's a man, she's a woman, it's different. So,
and she's dead, and he's still here, so that doesn't look good.
Yeah. Right. So yeah, near the latter years of their marriage as well, Kathy also, as we mentioned, seemed to develop an alcohol and cocaine problem. During those years, the late 70s, early 80s, Bob and Kathy spent much of their free time at their lakeside cottage in beautiful South Salem. Beautiful place, lakeside cottage. It seemed, I looked on the map, I don't know much about it, but it seemed like it was a little bit north of New York City and more of a rural area. We talked about how Bob loved to escape to nature. This was a perfect way to do it. He could spend the week in New York City with the Durst organization and then flee to South Salem and get back to nature.
Right.
And so all of this strife in their relationship came to a head on January 31st, 1982, when Kathy went missing. At the time of her disappearance, Kathy was a student in her fourth and final year of medical school, studying to be a pediatrician. She was only a few short months away from earning her degree. When on the evening of January 31st, 1982, she appeared unexpectedly at a dinner party thrown by her friend Gilberta Najami in Newtown, Connecticut. So this Gilberta plays a large role in this case as well. And I grew to really not like her throughout what I learned in the book. I learned a lot more about her in the book. The docuseries, The Jinx, doesn't show as much of her her lies and her bad side.
Okay, I was about to say, because you kind of confused me. We're talking about the same person, because in the Jinx, she was portrayed in a very good light, like a good friend.
Yeah, but if you learn the things that I learned in that book, Gilberta, it's hard to explain, but she had a close relationship with Kathy at the time, and she was partaking allegedly in the drugs and alcohol, and it sounded like this was a small family party that was at Gilberta's house, and it was like, just a little, a nothing type of party, but really it sounds like the reality was that Gilberta and Kathy were regularly, they were like cocaine buddies and alcohol, like they were partiers. They would go out to town, and Gilberta, in my opinion, was using Kathy, who had the money, and she was latching onto her, and she was egging her on to leave Bob as well. Allegedly, she was allegedly infatuated with Kathy, wanted to be with Kathy.
Oh my, okay.
Some accounts say she wanted to be with her. She was trying to break her and Bob up. She was egging her on to go home and start fights with Bob, and she was egging her on to threaten Bob and blackmail him and say, if you don't sign these divorce papers and give me this payout, I'm going to expose your family's corruption, tax documents, things like this.
Right. Oh, that's a bad idea.
Which may have really pushed Bob over the edge to do what he did. And yet she plays this innocent role, like, she came to me and she said, if anything happens to me, it was Bob, and I was there for her and I shouldn't have let her leave. And that's the role she's played this whole time, when there's another side that, from what I've heard, it sounds like she was egging her on to go back and force divorce papers on Bob.
Oh my.
Which would have benefited her, because, then Kathy would have fled back to Gilberta, what she wanted.
Yeah, wow, interesting insight. Yeah, I would have never gathered that from the documentary. I mean, I noticed that she did have a strong love for Kathy, and the fact at the end where she was like, when she was like, this turned my life upside down, I was like, whoa, wait a second. You must have been in love with this girl. I thought that for a second, but I thought, well, maybe like a sister. But maybe there was something a little more there.
And she took a book deal when back when, like, she was, if they did go to trial for Bob killing Kathy, her testimony would have been very important. Someone being as close to Kathy as she was, and being one of the last people to see Kathy on that night and all this stuff. And she really frustrated the detectives, because all of her contradictions, her lies, frustrated the detectives. And also she took a book deal before they were going to trial, which means she wouldn't have been able to testify, which means she could have hurt, the prosecution's case against Bob, just because she was being selfish and she was trying to benefit from it.
Right.
And she's always seemingly tried to put herself as the forefront. She was almost like she's the main victim of this whole thing at this point.
Yeah, you kind of get that vibe.
Everything I learned from her from the book, you'd have to read the book to understand, because the docuseries does not portray her in that light at all, for sure.
No, it does not.
But yeah, I grew to really just, like, when I watched her on the docuseries, I'm like, you fucking lying. Like, I could just see everything she says is calculated, and like, I don't know, I didn't like her.
Okay.
I could be off. I don't know. Maybe the book portrayed her in an unfavorable light for some reason, but that's the vibe I got, was she's a shit stirrer, I guess.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, it's obviously tragic what happened to her good friend. They were clearly close, but Kathy also had several other really close friends, and it's not set in stone that Gilberta was her number one best friend and confidant type of thing. That's the way she says it, but Kathy had other close friends as well.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. She was a lovable person, like we said at the beginning. Kathy had lots of friends, people that cared about her.
Yeah. Yeah. So back to the evening that Kathy went missing on January 31st, 1982. She was at Gilberta's party where, some would say Gilberta and her were doing some cocaine and drinking, and Gilberta may have been egging on Kathy to go back and basically blackmail Bob, or basically threaten him that sign the divorce papers or else type of thing. I'm going to expose your family's corruption, that type of thing. Or, the other side is maybe she just went and hung out with Gilberta and came home, and whatever happened, happened. Kathy left the party, went back to South Salem to the cottage where she shared with Bob, and a fight ensued. There's no doubt about that. Bob even admits that they got into it that night over what he hasn't really disclosed in detail, but they got into it. And she decided she was going to go back to New York City that night. And at what point, Robert maintains that he put his wife on a commuter train to New York City at Katona Station at 9:17 p.m. She tried to leave the cottage, and he said, "You're not driving in this condition," because apparently she was intoxicated. And his story is that, he drove her to the train station. She got on the 9:17 train, where he went back. His initial story was that he went back to the house, the cottage, and walked to a neighbor's house and had a drink with him. Before later speaking to his wife on the phone, where she was at the Manhattan apartment when he talked to her. And there's 3 different locations that would appear in his stories over the years. First, he would say that he called her from the cottage.
Yep.
And she was at the apartment. She answered. She was fine. Then he says that he called her from a store. He went to a store and he called her from a payphone. And then he says he was out walking his dog, and a couple miles from his home, he found a payphone and called her from there. So his story is all over the place.
Right.
Typical of someone who murdered his wife,
Absolutely. And then he talks about also that having drink with a neighbor, like a next door neighbor as well that night. But he didn't let the neighbor in on the lie, nor did he actually do this, which is so crazy.
How arrogant to think that the police wouldn't even go talk to the neighbor, right? And then confirm that story.
Right. The neighbor's like, what? No, we didn't have any drinks. He didn't even talk to me about this. That's crazy. Yeah. That's just arrogance, like you say. Yeah. Just how arrogant.
Well, one thing he did really well, and this may have been calculated, he may have talked to his family, his brothers, his father, who knows, but he does one thing really well in covering up his crimes and making it take a hell of a lot longer than it should have to discover what happened, in that he put Kathy in New York City in several ways. I don't know if he got to the doorman, the family got to the doorman, who got to this doorman that got the doorman to say that Kathy had come home that night.
Yeah.
Because they lived in the type of apartment in New York City where a doorman had to take you to your room, basically. And when the police go and talk to the doorman, he says, Kathy came home late on January 31st and I took her up to her room. That puts her in New York City, where we now know that Kathy was likely killed at the cottage and never made it to New York City.
Right.
She never got on that train. She was killed at the cottage during their fight, and Bob got rid of her body, and then he found multiple ways to put her in New York City, which means the investigation centered on New York City. They never even searched the South Salem cottage until much later.
Yeah, that was brilliant.
Which just really fucked the whole thing up.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Someone also made a call posing as Kathy to her college as well, the Albert Einstein College of Medicine. The next morning, on February 1st, someone made a call posing as Kathy, saying that she was ill and wouldn't make it to class. And this clearly wasn't Kathy.
Right.
And we have a theory of maybe who it would have been, that we can talk about later.
Okay.
He had a female friend and confidant that we've talked about during this case that easily could have made that call.
That's what I was going to say. I didn't know if you wanted to bring that up now or wait.
Yeah. It's brilliant, really. I mean, it makes the investigation center on New York City, and that basically made it a cold case over time because they had nothing to go on in New York City.
It's just what I would really like to know, even knowing all that I know about this case, I would like to know all the people who are involved. How many people were truly involved in covering this up for this long? Because he had to have had a team of people. And I know he's rich.
Well, it was fascinating.
So
the last episode of the Jinx, when the filmmaker got to the bottom of the fact that the Durst family had hired a private investigator, and what this private investigator had found was more than what the police had found. All the contradictions in Bob's story, had a whole report about it, and that was given to the Durst family. You know, it was given to Seymour and Doug and all of them, and they must have known right away, like, yeah, Bob fucking killed Kathy, and we just need to stay away from this thing and basically separate ourselves from Bob, and you know, hire him a lawyer and let the lawyer deal with it. And you know, we don't want to be anywhere near this because we're pretty sure that, you know, our son killed his wife.
Yep.
I think they knew early on, and that's just my opinion.
And so you don't think they were implemented in any of this? You don't think they helped him?
No, not necessarily. I think they just separated themselves from it.
Okay.
I mean, it's possible that they played a role in getting to the doorman and making the doorman lie about seeing Kathy that night. That's possible. I don't know why else the doorman would do that unless Bob got to him. I don't know, but the doorman would later recant this and say, no, I actually don't think I ever did see Kathy that night. So it's like, well, thanks for fucking this whole investigation up, dude.
Right. Yeah, we were going completely on your word. Thanks for that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Jeez.
So 3 weeks after Robert Durst reported Kathy missing, the superintendent at the Riverside Drive apartment found her possessions in the building's trash compactor. So he had gone to the apartment they shared in Manhattan and was dumping all of her belongings, like valuable shit, all of her makeup, her clothing, down the trash compactor, and to the point where the building's superintendent was like, hey, like, this is for trash. Stop dumping like all this shit down here.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And if you're expecting your wife back, why the hell are you getting rid of all her personal shit?
Right.
Oof. Yeah, that's hard to explain.
Yeah, and the police would learn that in the weeks preceding her disappearance, Kathy had asked Bob for a $250,000 divorce settlement. Instead, Durst canceled his wife's credit card, removed her name from the joint bank account, and refused to pay her medical school tuition. So was not all that receptive to the idea of getting divorced and paying her out.
No, he was not.
That's motive. That's motive if I've ever seen it, to kill her.
Yep.
And at the time of Kathy's disappearance, Robert had been dating Prudence Farrow for the prior 3 years and was living in a separate apartment as well. So he had been cheating on her for a while. She had discovered this. She found some weird Polaroid pictures. The book went in detail about this. She'd found some weird Polaroid pictures of like the inside of their apartment. It didn't have any like damning evidence as far as him cheating, but she was like, "Why?" She confronted him with like, "What's with these weird Polaroids of like our dresser and things like this?" And he caved in and said, "Oh, you know, I've been seeing this other woman." So there was this marriage was toast by the time that Kathy went missing. It's clear to everybody between the divorce stuff, the fact that he was seeing another woman, and she was also hanging out with other people as well and doing like I believe she had a drug dealer who sold her cocaine, who she hung out with quite frequently, who was a man.
Okay.
It's not clear whether anything was going on there or not, but she was spending time with him.
And honestly, there's no telling what she's doing at Gilberta's.
Right.
On a regular basis. You know what I'm saying? At these parties that they're having, she's going over there alone. Like, Bob wasn't the party type. He wasn't the type to go.
No, and Gilberta wanted her to separate from Bob, so
exactly
anything she could help along in that direction, she would.
Precisely. That's why I think, maybe some shit went down at some of these parties, and Bob wasn't an idiot. He knew this shit. Right. We talked about earlier how sleek, how sly he was at figuring shit out. And that may have pushed him, you know, to have his own affair. Or maybe vice versa. Maybe she knew he was having some type of affair and was like, fuck it.
And Bob had all the means in the world to hire a private investigator or two to follow Kathy around and see what she was really up to as well.
Oh, absolutely. She would never even know about it. Nobody would.
Nope. So Robert initially offered $100,000 for his wife's return, but then reduced it to $15,000. Imagine you're the heir to a $1 billion company. You've got endless money at your disposal, and all you offer up for your wife's return is $15,000.
Right. Even $100,000.
I would offer up more than that for my wife if she was missing, and I'm obviously not a millionaire by any means.
Right. But if I was a multi-millionaire, it'd be minimum $1 million. Minimum $1 million.
Yeah, at least $1 million, right?
I want this. I want her found like yesterday. Yeah, I want.
What's funny is if we believe what really happened is that he killed her and disposed of her by now. Why wouldn't he just put up a massive amount? Like, why not put up like $10 million reward? Because she's never going to be able to be returned. why not make it massive? Just because it looks, it would look better, I guess. Like, it would look like you're actually urgently looking, want your wife returned. But like the Durst family couldn't have been more, casual about Kathy's disappearance. The elder Dursts, Seymour, and even Bob's younger brother Doug. Like, this was their sister-in-law, their daughter-in-law. This was someone that they had been in their life for like 8 years. I think they'd been married at this point,
right?
And they could care less about her disappearing. They weren't even really willing to talk to the detectives in detail. They just wanted it to go away. Once again, this was an inconvenience to the billionaires, and they didn't want anything to do with it.
Well, it's almost like they weren't a corrupt billionaire family who's made people disappear before. They. I mean, come on, Lord.
Michael. Like, even on Patreon, we gotta be careful.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just saying, allegedly, of course, but these millionaire families, these places, this old money, man. It don't get here for nothing. These families often have dark pasts, and one person disappear here and there, that's a small price to pay for billions in their minds.
Yeah.
Yep. They got business to run as usual.
Yep. So, unsatisfied with the New York City detectives' police work in searching for Kathy and what happened, Kathy's friends and her sister started to do their own investigation. So Gilberta and one of Kathy's sisters actually drove to the cottage in South Salem, and Gilberta, the documentary shows them getting some trash from the curb. That's not what happened. Gilberta actually threw a rock through the window and went into the South Salem home and gathered trash and belongings from in the house and did her own investigating around the house. Actually broke and entered the cabin.
Yeah.
So what they found was, a lot of trash that was Kathy's belongings. Yet again, just like back at the apartment in Manhattan, Bob had been disposing of her belongings, seemingly cutting ties, like he's done with Kathy, even though she's only been gone for a few weeks or whatever. And they also found in the trash, they found what appeared to be an itinerary for Bob's day that she went missing. An itinerary, and they also found a note that had some very weird things written on it. It was like boat, bridge, shovel, like a bunch of words that sound as though someone's preparing to dispose of a body.
Yeah, it really did. It was kind of hard not to think that from the list.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, New York City detectives believe that Kathy made it to New York City that night because of the doorman and because of the call that was made to the college the next morning, when in reality, she, as we said, most likely never made it out of the South Salem cottage alive. Due to this, their investigation centered in New York City and ultimately stalled out. They never properly pressured Bob or did a thorough search of the South Salem cottage until it was far too late. They didn't do a proper search of South Salem, that cottage where she was likely killed, until 18 years later, when there had been multiple other people that had lived there.
I was about to say, Bob wasn't even living there at the time.
No. So Kathy's disappearance eventually fell out of headlines, just as the Durst family had hoped. And 8 years after Kathy disappeared, Robert divorced her, claiming spousal abandonment. Oh my gosh, the disrespect on that.
Seriously.
Like, she abandoned me.
How could she?
Crazy, right? So then in 1999, this case picks back up again when state police investigator Joseph Becerra got a tip. He got a tip from an unlikely place, which oftentimes we've seen over the course of this podcast. Sometimes a case breaks in weird ways, and in this case, the 17-year-old case of Kathy Durst that had gone cold gets reopened because of a man named Timothy Martin, who had been arrested multiple times for public lewdness and wanted to trade information with a detective about an unsolved homicide in South Salem for leniency in his sentencing. And this would be in November of 1999 when Becerra, who had never heard of this case, he had never heard of Kathy Durst or Robert Durst, and this scumbag weirdo that's been flashing his junk to everybody basically offers up like, hey, I've got information in a cold case murder. Right. And he's like, all right, what do you got, Timothy? Let's hear what you got. This better be good.
Yeah.
And it's funny because Becerra, the way the book describes it, Joseph Becerra, the detective, just becomes curious about the case. He's like, he talks to one of the other elder detectives, and he's like, oh yeah, the billionaire that his wife disappeared, and it looks like he did it, but we never found anything. And so Becerra dives into the case over the weekend. I believe that, he was going through a divorce himself, and he was kind of lonely. And so over the weekend, on his own time, dove into the case files of this. And he starts re-interviewing witnesses and took over the case to the Westchester County prosecutor. And this is when they finally search the South Salem home in 2000. Right. They go to the South Salem home. They get permission from the new owner of the house. And they get permission to do a full search of not only the house, but like the lake behind the house. They take apart the crawl space. It had like a weird crawl space, which apparently Bob had been sleeping in for a little while after Kathy's disappearance, which is bizarre.
That is bizarre. He was sleeping in there?
Yeah. Yeah. And it was like not even tall enough to stand up in. It was weird.
Wow. You think he was just hiding?
Maybe it's because he was doing such extensive cleaning of the house itself. Maybe.
Yeah. Or maybe he was afraid somebody was going to come for revenge. And he was like, well, if you break in, you got to find me first.
Mm-hmm. That's possible. Yeah.
Yeah. Safe place to sleep. Because he did live alone still.
There's definitely a weird dichotomy between Bob and Gilberta in that they both want each other dead. There's no doubt about that.
Oh,
and
yeah.
Bob would actually be found many years later with Gilberta's address written down in his car. Like he planned to kill her at some point, and I'm sure she felt the same way. So that may be part of why he was sleeping in the crawl space. But Joseph Becerra would come to find out that there had been a couple of officers that had walked around the South Salem house. They hadn't done a real search back when Kathy went missing, but they had walked around the house, and there had actually been blood on the, I want to say the dishwasher, like blood spatter on the dishwasher that they never had tested. They just basically kind of let it go.
Oh my God.
But yeah, by the time that they finally do a real investigation and real search of the property in 2000, there was nothing left that could have shown Kathy's, it could have solved Kathy's murder. Divers even conducted a grid search of Lake Truesdale, which, the cottage was backed up to. And Becerra said that he was not surprised when no significant evidence turned up. There had been 2 or 3 owners since Robert Durst sold the cottage, and the lake was likely frozen at the time of Kathy's disappearance. He says, quote, "It's kind of like a needle in a haystack, but you have to investigate and hope for the best." So while Becerra was interviewing dozens of people, including police who had handled the case initially and Kathy's friends and family, he stayed away from the Durst associates and family, not wanting to tip them off or that he was reinvestigating this case. However, that plan got ruined on November 11th, 2000, when New York City papers broke the news of the investigation. He said, quote, "It disappointed me. I was trying to keep the case quiet." And this starts a chain reaction of events where Bob is now paranoid that he's going to go down for the murder that he had thought he'd gotten away with so long ago. And he goes on the lam. So this new investigation burst into headlines on November of 2000. And Robert quickly married a second time, gave his new bride control over his financial affairs, and rented a $300 a month room in Galveston, Texas, while posing as a mute woman.
This is the weirdest thing. Because this is how the documentary opens. It opens at this point in the story, and I'm like, what the fuck is this documentary about? What is going on?
Yeah. I'd like to see an alternate universe in which this Kathy's case never gets reopened. I mean, I don't want to see that. I like the way things played out, don't get me wrong, because we actually get some closure on some stuff. But I'd like to just view remotely an alternate universe in which her case is never reopened. What direction does Bob's life go in from there? Because this reopening of the case and the headlines that are made from it makes him nervous, and he goes on the weirdest path in his life, posing as a woman in Galveston, Texas, renting a shithole apartment for $300 a month, ends up, as we'll find out, killing a couple more people for sure. Like, these are not even in doubt. He went to trial for both of them and may have killed other people. But like, what happens if Kathy's case is never reopened? Does he just ride out the rest of his life working for the Durst organization? Or does he do some other insane shit and kill different people? I think that's more likely. He just ends up going in another batshit direction. But
oh, yeah. He just gets bored eventually. That's just what's going to happen.
Yeah, he probably would end up killing his brother Doug, would be my guess. And maybe more people.
Yeah, most likely.
So yeah, he ends up in Galveston, Texas when news breaks out that and there was a hotshot DA woman that came onto the scene that really wanted to solve this case as well because it would have helped her career, it seemed.
Right.
I forget her name, but she was featured heavily in the Jinx as well. So there was a lot of pressure suddenly on him, and they were likely going to find some stuff, and he was nervous. So he flees to Galveston, Texas, of all places, which is actually pretty smart because it's a place that a lot of people go to get away, apparently, to hide.
Oh, really? Why is that?
Yeah. It's just a very slow. Have you ever actually pulled up Galveston on a map? I did out of curiosity. I usually do this with true crime locations and things like that. I want to get a feel for it, so I'll go to Google Maps and I'll like look around.
Right.
And Galveston is probably not what you're imagining. Like you hear Texas, but it's like it's almost like it's like an island, or like it's kind of like Long Island is like a long stretch of.
Yeah, I see.
It's off the coast, and it's what I'm saying. Like it looks like a place you would go to get away, and also it's a slower lifestyle, and the people there are freedom-loving people, and we see that on display for a trial that he's about to go on after killing a different person. And yeah, we'll get into all that, but like, yeah, he runs away to Galveston. It makes sense when you really think about it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I guess it does. A lot of places to dispose of a body out in Galveston. Lots of water.
That's another thing. He liked coastal shit, waters to dump bodies in, and he dumps another one shortly after this.
Mm-hmm.
So he marries this other woman. She's featured heavily in the Jinx as well. Can't think of her name off the top of my head, but she was very clever, smart woman, and I think he chose her for a reason because she was going to have his back, and she, like I said, was very cunning herself, and she was going to protect his wealth, even if he went on trial and they tried to take this or that away from him. The family tried to sue him, whatever. She was going to protect his wealth by marrying her and also signing over power of attorney to her. He was protecting what he had while he was on the run.
Right. That's smart.
Yep. So during this time, he's living in Galveston, Texas. He's posing as a woman. What was the name? He'd stolen the identity of a girl that he'd gone to high school with.
It was like Dorothy Signer.
He's wearing.
I think it was.
Yes. Dorothy Signer. That's right. And so yeah, he's living as Dorothy Signer in this $300 a month apartment. Meanwhile, he's also hearing from his old friend Susan Berman, who was acting as like a publicist for him back in the time when Kathy went missing. She was speaking up for him, defending him, and now she's in dire straits. She was running out of money. She'd burned through that money that she had inherited from her father and stuff, and she was trying to publish some new books and things like that. So she was basically writing all of her friends, Bob included, at which point Bob sent her 2 checks on separate occasions for $25,000 apiece, totaling $50K to help her, tell her story, write a book, whatever she needed.
Right.
But meanwhile, Detective Becerra wanted to interview Susan Berman after being told that by Kathy's friends and family members that Susan Berman may have played a role in helping Bob get away with murder back in 1982.
Oh yeah, everybody knew about Susan.
Everybody knew that Bob and Susan were tight, and that Susan would have his back no matter what, and that she may have been the woman that called Kathy's college back in the day, the Einstein College of Medicine.
Most likely,
she may have helped cover that up, and she may have known some stuff. So she's contacted by these New York City detectives, and they're telling her, "Hey, we want to come out and talk to you." At which point, she lets Bob know, "Hey, these detectives want to talk to me," and that would, set in motion more events and another person being killed. Detective Becerra would never get the chance to talk to old Susan Berman because on December 24th, Christmas Eve, 2000, Susan Berman was found murdered execution style in her home in Los Angeles after her neighbors called the police to report that her back door was left open and her 3 fox terriers were loose running around, leaving bloody paw prints all over the place.
Gosh.
The police would respond and find her back door open, as her neighbor had said, and inside the house, Susie Berman was found lying dead, face first in her bedroom, shot in the back of the head, and her terrier's paw prints tracked a pool of blood, or little bloody paw prints all over her house from the pool of blood that had gathered. There was no signs of forced entry, and her purse sat untouched. This would lead detectives to believe that she had known the intruder, the perpetrator of the killer.
Yep. And robbery was
due
not
to the fact
motive.
that she was. she came from a mob family. She was writing books about the mob. She was a little paranoid about letting strangers in or whatever.
Right.
So, I mean, of course, that muddied the investigation because she is writing about the mob. She had her father was in the mob, and it's like this was a mob-style hit, one shot to the back of the head in the person's home,
right?
Execution style. So, it definitely, there was a larger pool of suspects than in Kathy's murder, let's say. But also, it was discovered that, of course, Bob had motive. He was worried that what she was gonna disclose to the detectives in regards to Kathy's disappearance. Bob was worried about that, and also they would find that Bob was indeed in California at the time of Kathy's murder, or not
Yikes.
Kathy, Susan's murder.
Yeah.
Yep. So a few days after Susan's murder, a letter addressed to the Beverly Hills Police Department, postmarked December 23rd, so the day before she was killed, or the day before she was found, I guess. Maybe it was the same day, postmarked the same day she was killed, I would guess, contained Susan Berman's address and the word cadaver. And on the front of the envelope, the address was misspelled as far as Beverly. It was spelled Beverley instead of Beverly. So there was an extra E in there,
right?
Which is pretty distinct.
Absolutely.
And that would come into play large at the end of the Jinx docuseries. It would break this case wide open, that misspelling on that envelope. But we'll talk more about that in a bit. So as we mentioned, Robert was known to have been in Northern California days before Berman was killed, and to have flown from San Francisco to New York the night before Berman's body was discovered. So it puts him right squarely in the state that she was killed. Now, his phone, which he used constantly to call and check his voicemail, was seemingly turned off during the time on the 24th, which
how convenient.
Makes sense. If he was driving down from Northern California to Los Angeles, he wouldn't want to be tracked. He would shut his phone off.
Exactly.
So
exactly. And you don't want to fly directly to LA. That can be tracked. So it makes perfect sense that he would fly to Northern California, get his car,
drive down the coast.
Because he had a car that he kept in a parking garage or an impound lot or something in Northern California. I can't remember the name of the town exactly, but it was just north of San Francisco.
He would frequently stay in these coastal towns all over the U.S. Sometimes he had places there. Like I believe he had at least one place in California that he would go and stay.
Yeah, coastal town, like you said, more rural. Upstate California is more rural. That's what he liked.
What's up, creepers? Let me take a minute to talk to you about Care Of. Care Of is a subscription service that ships high-quality, personalized vitamins, supplements, and powders conveniently to your door every single month. Just think about something attainable you want to feel this year, like less overscheduling, feeling more grounded, or feeling more accepting and in tune with your body. Care Of can help you with that, with personalized guidance, quality products, and encouraging healthy habits so you can see and feel results. All you do is you take a short, in-depth quiz about your lifestyle and health goals for a personalized, doctor-backed recommendation, taking the guesswork out of what supplements are best suited for you. The quiz is quick, easy, and fun. And after the quiz, you will get individual packets that you take every single day. And like I said, it takes all the guesswork out of it. I love being able to wake up every morning, tear open a new pack of supplements, take them right there all at once with my breakfast, and I'm done. I can feel good knowing that I got the supplements and the nutrition that my body needs for the rest of the day. And one thing I love about Care Of is their ingredients are thoughtfully sourced and backed by research so you can feel good about what you're putting in your body. And because you're True Crime Guys listeners, you guys can get 50% off your order at takecareof.com. That's takecareof.com and enter code CREEPER50. Again, that's takecareof.com, code CREEPER50.
So although Robert had confirmed to the LAPD that he had sent Berman $25,000 and faxed investigators a copy of her 1982 deposition regarding his missing wife, he declined to be further questioned about the murder. And just like that, Susan Berman's murder would remain cold for a while, as Bob was traveling around using different stolen identities from people he met or knew in the past. And at this time, he's renting that apartment in Galveston under the name Dorothy Signer. And his disguise would ultimately ignite a friendship with a neighbor named Morris Black while he lived in this apartment in Galveston. This Morris Black man was not a well-liked person. He was by most accounts downright nasty, He was like a shrewd man that was annoyed by. He was annoyed by most around him. He annoyed most around him. He had like one rental property. The book described that he had early in his life, he had purchased this property and he was still the landlord of it in his older age. And he would go there personally to collect rent every single month. And that was what he lived off of. And just an old nasty guy that people didn't like.
Yeah, he's the typical get off my lawn character, man.
Yes.
There was one story that they shared in the documentary. They said that one of his neighbors said that he would walk down the street, multiple houses down, to go yell at a neighbor who was smoking on his own porch because he could smell his cigarette smoke outside. And it's like, wow.
Yeah.
The audacity of somebody telling someone what to do on their own property. Yeah, that was Morris Black for you.
Yeah. So, meanwhile, Robert Durst posing as Dorothy Siner would ignite a friendship with this Morris Black character. They were two peas in a pod, I guess, a couple of grumpy old men together.
I can see that.
And he would ultimately, Morris Black would find out that Dorothy Siner was actually Robert Durst and that he was hiding out in Galveston, and Morris Black didn't really seem to care much. He's like, yeah, I've tried to get away before in my past as well. Morris Black was not on good terms with his family. They hadn't talked to him. They generally, I think he like talked to one of his sisters every now and then and wouldn't tell her where he lived. And he was just that type of character.
Yeah.
And this leads us to September 28th, 2001, when a man that was out fishing with his children, actually, I believe it was one of the children. I think it was a young boy that discovered a torso floating in the waters of Galveston Bay. And you got to love HBO because they actually show the picture or maybe even footage of this torso floating in the Galveston Bay. And it's crazy how much it doesn't look how you'd imagine. It just looked like just a perfect torso. You know, it wasn't like discolored. It just looked like you could slap it on a person and it was normal. It was that clear what it was.
Yes. Yeah, it was.
And
quite disturbing.
And so the police would be alerted that there was a human torso found in the Galveston Bay. And during a search, the police officer discovered a man's arms and legs amidst plastic garbage bags nearby. However, the head was never found. The bags contained some crucial evidence that they discovered inside the bags that there was a bow saw, a receipt from a local hardware store, a drop cloth, and a newspaper with the delivery address of an apartment house in Galveston. The victim, Morris Black, lived there. So the victim was Morris Black, who we just discussed at length.
Right.
And investigators would discover Mr. Durst living at the apartment next door, disguised as a woman. And this is because the receipt in the bag, led them to the address, and they would discover Mr. Durst there. Mm-hmm. So yeah, he would go down. Robert Durst couldn't get out of this one. He had left far too much evidence. He'd bagged up the dismembered body along with crucial evidence of the murder and thrown them into the bay, expecting them to sink. However, they did not sink.
No.
He just figured they were heavy enough. He talked at length in the docuseries about this. Yeah, it was in the trial, I think. There's a lot of footage of the Morris Black trial in Galveston in the docuseries.
Yeah,
the Jinx.
I can't believe his mob friend didn't give him better advice on how to sink a body. What the hell, right?
I know, right?
Your best friend was a mob daughter, and you don't even know
Susan
how to sink
Berman
a body?
he'd already killed her, so he couldn't get her advice anymore.
Yeah, but you didn't. It didn't ever come up. You didn't read none of her articles about mobs.
He didn't read any of her mob books. Mob books.
Come on, you grew up around mobs. You grew up in New York City. You're old money. Come on, we're not that stupid. Yep. It's just crazy that he didn't think these body parts, like whole human bodies, can float. You realize that, don't you? And then when you cut them into pieces, they're even more buoyant. They're less dense. Yep. Like it's gonna all float.
Yep.
It's crazy.
Yep.
Oh well, I'm glad he was dumb enough to make this mistake.
Yeah, so he was arrested for the murder in Galveston, and they didn't know who he was. They didn't know his past. They didn't know he came from a family of billionaires. Durst frequently dressed as kind of like someone with no means. He dressed in sweatpants and like raggedy clothing oftentimes. Mm-hmm. And so when they bring him in, they ask him, you're having a $250,000 bail put on you. Do you have $250,000? And he goes, not on me. And
they're like, huh?
That kind of threw them for a loop. Like, was he joking or does he really have $250,000? And they would find out It wouldn't take long to find out that he did indeed have access to $250,000. It was not an issue. He made one call, and the next morning he posted bail and was out of there. And
like,
this is when the hilarious part happens, where he posts this bail and he fails to show up for his arraignment and becomes a wanted fugitive. A warrant is issued for his arrest, and a month later, on November 30th, he was caught stealing from a supermarket in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, after trying to shoplift a few Band-Aids. Not even the whole box of Band-Aids. He takes a few out of the box and shoves them in his pocket.
Oh my God.
Also, a newspaper and a chicken salad sandwich, even though he had $500 cash in his pocket and over $37,000 in cash in his car.
Oh my
He
God.
just couldn't help himself.
No,
And this is a lot on the line. It's
just
it's
wanted
not
the
like you
thrill.
have a warrant for some unpaid parking tickets that you could go down for. Like, you are literally on the lam, running from a murder trial, and you steal a few Band-Aids and a sandwich and get caught.
You know, Lauren, I think he honestly didn't understand the justice system at this point, and I think that he thought that he was untouchable. You know, because like when they interviewed him about getting out on bail, he said, I had no idea that if you were indicted for murder, you could just pay a fine and they would let you out. He's like, so I just paid it. You know what I mean? Like he acted like he was oblivious to the fact it's like, well, yeah, you're out on bail, but you're not done. You're not set free.
Yeah.
You're not found innocent. Right. And I feel like he was like, okay, this is all behind me now. They let me out. What's the big deal? I can go back.
Don't you get the feeling with Durst?
But then why did he shave his head and try to be disguised, right?
Yeah. Don't you get the feeling, though, throughout the series, you just watching him and hearing all the weird stuff he did, I always couldn't help but feel that he wanted to be caught, that he wanted the whole charade to be over. I think maybe there was a third time in which he was actually happy in his life, and that was when he was in jail following this, like awaiting trial, and like in Galveston, and he like was actually friendly with the inmates, and there's these pictures of him hanging out with them.
Yeah.
Because the pressure of everything was off of him at that point. There was nothing expected of him, and I don't know. I feel like he wanted to be caught, and he wanted it to be over. Like the pressures of his family and everything was too much, and that's, I think, part of why he does so much of this stupid shit. He's just asking to be caught and be held accountable for his crimes. I think when he gets acquitted for this Morris Black murder, which we'll find out, it's crazy. I almost feel like he was relieved, but also like, really, I got away with it again. Like, of course I did.
Yep.
Because I'm, came from this family and I have all this money, and like the normal person would have gotten arrested, would have gone to prison forever on this one, but because of my name, I got away with it again.
Yep. Yeah, you're right.
So yeah, now he's going to go to trial for Morris Black's murder after he had dismembered the man, thrown his body in trash bags into the bay, stolen a sandwich after running and not appearing at his arraignment. Inside, after the shoplifting incident, they have him in custody and they search his rental car, which yielded $37,000 in cash, 2 guns, marijuana. Morris Black's driver's license is another piece of evidence tying him to the murder.
That's damning.
And directions to Gilberta Najami's home in Connecticut. That's what I briefly mentioned earlier. He was clearly on his way to kill Gilberta when he was caught here.
He was. Yep, he was tying up loose ends, brother. That's what he was doing.
Mm-hmm.
He was.
Yep.
He was taking care of everybody who knew something.
Yep. Robert also used this time on the run to stalk his brother Douglas, visiting the driveway of his home in Katona, New York, while armed. So he was going to, like you said, loose ends, he was going to kill his brother Douglas, and he was going to kill Gilberta. And I think at that point he would have been satisfied just going to prison after that. And if he knocked them off, he despised both of them.
I agree. I don't think he was scared of prison at all.
I think that was less about closing up. I think that was less about like closing up loose ends and more just about like he really hated them.
Yep.
And blamed them for his problems and things like that.
No doubt. No doubt. Yeah, I agree. I think if he kills them, he is completely content in prison. He thinks that he's done something.
Yeah. There was another kind of funny part in the docuseries when they asked Robert why his brother Douglas would hire a bodyguard.
Yeah.
And he said it was because he's a pussy.
Yeah. See,
he's like, why would he think I was going to hurt him? He's a pussy. And it's like, bro, you were sitting in his driveway with a fucking loaded revolver.
Right. You've been jealous of him since you were children.
Yeah.
He's super successful and not going to prison. Yeah, there's a lot of reasons you'd want to kill him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You blame him for the direction your life has gone because you should be the heir apparent to this family business that's worth billions and you're not. And of course you want to kill him.
Exactly.
Yeah, and also another funny part in the docuseries is during this time in Galveston when he's awaiting trial, the pictures of him, these Polaroids from inside the prison of him hanging out with these massive, scary men. Now, Robert is a very small man.
Yes.
He's very small, frail.
He's just like Define.
On each side of him, he's got a massive white man and a massive black man on each side of him, and he's like posing like a gangster in jail. It's fucking hilarious to me.
Yeah, he's doing the squat thing down in front, you know. Like,
yeah, dude. Right, you might as well be throwing up like West Side
like,
or whatever.
These are my boys.
Yeah,
but you know, those dudes, they're like, you know, they probably kissed his ass because they were like, this guy could help us get out of here. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, he said they treated me with the utmost respect.
Yeah, I bet. You're a fucking millionaire. Like, that's what they're thinking. These guys aren't planning on spending their whole lives in here. They're thinking maybe if we protect him in here, maybe he'll give us a little payday later on.
Yeah. And he also discussed how he looked up to them because, like we mentioned earlier, everything they had, they'd gotten from nothing, that they came from no means. And
yeah,
once again, I'm like, well, they're in prison, so I don't think they have a whole lot.
Well, they have nothing,
whatever.
So...
They made it to prison all on their own. I did it off the back of my billionaire enterprise.
There you go. Well, that's just another example of how your perception can get so skewed, from being raised that way.
Yeah.
Being around that. It's just the human condition, man. It's foreign romanticism. You think what someone else has is better than what you have, and they're luckier than you for whatever reason. You can rationalize the craziest things.
So Bob would go on to employ attorneys John Waldron and Dick DeGuerin while he was held on charges in Pennsylvania. And this was after he had fired the attorney that had been appointed to him by his brother Douglas, Michael Kennedy, because Robert, was urged by his current wife to fire this attorney, thinking, she was right in thinking that, whoever Douglas hires is not going to have Robert's best interest in mind. He's going to try and strip him of everything and try and get him convicted, I'm sure, if he could, if Douglas had anything to say about it. So he ends up going with a tag team of Dick DeGuerin and John Waldron.
He couldn't decide. He's like, I'll just take both.
Yeah, I'll just take both, and I'm hoping the $600K gets me off. And money was kind of irrelevant if I'm going to be locked away anyway, so I might as well spend whatever I have to get the best defense possible.
True that.
And so he would be extradited to Texas for trial. And in 2003, Robert Durst was tried for the murder of Morris Black. On the death of Black, the prosecution presented the jury only with premeditated first-degree murder, no lesser murder or manslaughter charges, which ended up being a big mistake because the defense would turn this into a case of self-defense. And really, it was two men in a room. One came out alive, and it's kind of hard to argue against self-defense especially when you hear the character witnesses and you hear more about Morris Black and what a strange character he was, and he was disliked by everyone, and he was just a nasty dude. And they portray that picture of Morris Black, and and then Robert Durst actually took the stand, which is usually advised against in your own murder trial, and basically portrayed a tale of Morris Black going crazy, and he was out of money. He was going to get evicted. He found out that Durst had all this money and threatened Durst that if he didn't give him some money, that he was going to shoot him, and a fight ensues, and basically Black ends up shot in the head accidentally during this fight that ensues. And then at that point, Robert Durst is scared that he's going to go down for murder, and he chops up the body and tries to get rid of it. And they turn this into a self-defense case, and it plays well in Galveston, Texas, where, it's a stand your ground state, self-defense. It's a freedom state type of thing. And the population there, they respond well to this story that the defense told.
Yes, because I think it has a lot to do with the way he started the altercation, because he claims that he came home and then Morris was already in his house.
First, we have to preamble that with they had already had an incident before he comes home and Durst was in his apartment. He had already kicked he'd already kicked Black out because there was one occasion where he came out of the bathroom and Black was pointing a gun at what was he pointing it at? Like something on the wall. Was it
his eviction notice? He claims that he hung an eviction notice on the wall and shot it, right?
Yes.
But there was no hole in the eviction notice later.
Right. So it was a made-up story, but it played well with the jury.
It did. And here's the thing, though. You kill somebody in self-defense, right? And you shoot him in the face on accident, is what he claims, that the gun went off. He killed him on accident. Okay. Well, then why get rid of the head? Why not leave the head to prove that happened?
Yep. Yeah. So due to the fact that there was only two men and one survived, and there was no witnesses to say whether this was self-defense or not, the fact that the Morris Black's head was never recovered, the prosecutors were unable to present sufficient forensic evidence to dispute Durst's account of the struggle, and the fact that they only went for first-degree premeditated murder rather than any other charges, regarding him chopping up the body. The jury was urged by the defense to look at this case simply as what happened prior to Morris Black's death, not what happened after. That's irrelevant. He's not being tried for tampering with evidence or with a body following a death.
Right.
He is being charged with first-degree murder. Now, do you believe he murdered this man, or do you believe there was a struggle and that he had to kill Morris Black, or do you think that that's even possible? Because if it's possible, then you cannot convict him of murder, which honestly, if I'm on the jury, not knowing anything about Robert Durst at the time, just trying to look at this case individually, I would have let him off as well, because the fucking prosecution screwed up by just putting this up as a first-degree murder case.
Yeah.
And you can't rule out self-defense. You just can't.
Nope.
And
it's impossible.
they should have put other charges up that he could have gone down for, and they didn't. And I think they know damn well they screwed up.
Yeah. And the only thing and
obviously Durst had a great set of attorneys that really, and they were almost laughing about it afterwards, which is kind of weird in the Jinx, how they were like, we really told a story, and it's almost like they know they let a madman out that definitely killed this dude, but they're like, but that's the system we're in,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And but even without the head, there was a lot of other questionable evidence too, but like you say, not enough to overturn the fact that it still could have been accidental. Like, for instance, on the torso of Morris Black, there was significant bruising
bruises
and abrasions on his back, as if he was laying on his face and someone was stomping on him, or maybe had their foot on the body while it was face down while dismembering it. You know what I'm saying? Something like that. But it is odd that he just killed his friend Susan
Berman,
executional style, right? Back of the head, left her in the apartment because he didn't need to dispose of that body, because allegedly he wasn't even in LA. But I think he did the exact same thing to Morris Black. I think he had him in his apartment, and maybe Black was asking for money. Maybe it did get kind of intense, and at one point in time when he wasn't looking, he was turned around and he shot him in the back of the head, and there you go. I mean, that's why the head's missing.
Yep.
That's what I think happened. It's all alleged, but
I agree.
But again, without the head, you can't prove any of that. Can't prove shit.
Right. Yep.
So
on December 21st, 2004, Robert Durst pled guilty to two accounts of bail jumping and one account of evidence tampering after being acquitted for the murder of Morris Black on November 11th, 2003. So he would go down later for evidence tampering for the dismemberment of Black's body a full year later. And as part of the plea bargain, he received a sentence of 5 years and was given credit for time served, requiring him to serve 3 years in prison. He would ultimately be paroled in 2005 in July, and the rules of his release required him to stay near his home. Permission was required to travel. However, that December, Durst made an unauthorized trip to a boarding house where Black had been killed, and to a nearby shopping mall. And at the mall, out of sheer coincidence, he ran into former Galveston trial judge Susan Chris, who had presided over his trial. So the woman who presided over the trial of the murder and placed these stipulations on him to not travel without authorization sees him at the mall.
Oh my God.
Just another funny incident. And due to this, the courts determined that Durst had violated the terms of his parole and returned him back to jail, where he would be released again from custody in March of 2006. And from 2006, for a while, he would mostly stay in the shadows and out of the headlines. He did, however, sue his family. He sued the family fortune and was brought out of the family trust for $65 million in 2006. So they had removed him from the family trust, and he sued them for that and got a massive payout of $65 million in 2006.
Damn.
Where he could have just ridden off into the sunset, you'd think, all right, I got away with murder twice.
Yeah.
3 times, really.
Get the hell out of here.
And I've got $65 million in the bank. Yeah. But in 2010, a film came out called All Good Things, which we briefly mentioned earlier, starring Ryan Gosling and Kirsten Dunst. Ryan Gosling playing Robert Durst, a conflicted man from a family fortune that had been cut out, and it presented a lightly fictionalized version of his life, and he loved it. He thought Ryan Gosling did a great job portraying him.
Of course.
And he agreed to. He ended up contacting the film's producer and agreed to sit down for more than 20 hours of interviews. And like I said, he could have ridden off into the sunset, but like by involving himself in the limelight again, it allowed more evidence to be found and things to be tied together.
Absolutely. Again, like you say, it's almost like he wanted to get caught, man. It's part of his pride. It's part of, he's like, look what I accomplished. Even rich people haven't accomplished what I've accomplished. Have you killed 3 people? You know, it's like he's fucking
right. Money can't buy that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So he also gave the filmmaker, the film producer of All Good Things, access to more than 60 cartons of his private papers, family mementos, credit card receipts, phone bills, and legal papers. The filmmakers turned it into a 6-part HBO documentary that aired in 2015 called The Jinx, which we keep talking about, in which Robert admitted to violence towards his first wife. He admitted to lying to investigators on several occasions early on in the investigation. You know, things like whether he had a drink with his neighbor or not. He admitted that he didn't, that he was just doing that so that they wouldn't come question him or bother him. And most striking, perhaps, was a 1999 letter the filmmakers found that Robert had written to Miss Berman in Beverly Hills. Now, we mentioned that letter that whoever killed Susan Berman had put in the mail the day that she was killed, that had this misspelling of Beverly on the letterhead.
Right.
And it was in all caps and very distinct writing and misspelled Beverly. During the 6-part docuseries, The Jinx, I think it was the last, either the 5th or 6th episode, Susan Berman's stepson was going through some of her stuff that had been given to him after her death, and he finds a letter that Bob had sent to his dead stepmother. And the letter, it's absolutely chilling when you see it, because you could overlay it over the letter that the murderer wrote of Susan Berman, down to the misspelling of Beverly, the very distinctive capital letters that were written, all with similar features to them.
Yep.
They were a perfect match, clearly showing that Bob Durst had sent that letter to the police the day that Susan Berman was killed, and the killer could be the only person that sent that letter, because it was sent before her body was even found.
Exactly. So yeah, it's kind of damning evidence, and it matches up too perfect. And they had this examined. They didn't just take this letter and lay him over like you're saying and be like, oh yeah, this is the same. No, they took this to a handwriting specialist. He diagnosed that piece of writing, both letters.
And honestly,
it
didn't take a specialist.
It didn't take a
really
specialist at all. But
I mean,
it is necessary in in court,
in the eyes of the court system and the justice system, for sure.
Yes,
but yeah, like any fool could look at him and tell that's certainly the same person that wrote those.
No doubt. But you can't go off of that.
So yeah. So the makers of The Jinx sat down with him and they basically blindsided him with that evidence. He didn't know that they had found this letter that matched up to the Susan Berman death letter, and they sit down for their final interview for The Jinx documentary.
Oh man,
and they,
spoilers here,
they hit
guys.
him with it, and his reaction is it's timeless, because he has like this involuntary reaction where he starts burping, and like you could tell he's just trying to keep his shit together.
Yeah.
But I almost thought he was gonna have a heart attack.
Well, I think it has to do with the tics, like the nervous tics that he has. I think they get significantly worse when he's lying, and you've noticed that. I'm sure you did throughout the thing. When anytime it was a confrontational question, he would answer, and then he would glance off to one way or the other, and then do his little twitch, and maybe even
down
grab
into the
his
right.
ear.
I noticed he would look down into the right, and it was the only time he would do it was when he would answer these questionable.
It's creepy, dude.
Hard questions. Yeah. So in the last moments of in the final episode of The Jinx, he's hit with that evidence. The letterhead matches up. The letter he had sent to Susan with the $25,000 check matches up perfectly to the letterhead of the death letter saying that there's a cadaver at her house. He has that weird reaction where he starts burping, and he denies. He says, I wrote the one that had the check in it. I didn't write the death letter. And man, the filmmaker, I forget his name, but he's like, can you tell me which one's which, when he just holds up the two writings alone?
Yeah.
And he's like, no, I can't.
He can't do it.
And they wrap up their interview, and basically the docuseries ends with him. They still have him mic'd up, and he's did this on several occasions where he was mic'd up
How
and
did
didn't
he
realize it and
forget
was talking to himself.
Oh my God.
That once again, I think he was trying to get caught. I think he damn well knew that he was still being recorded.
Dude, I don't know. If you're wearing one of those little lapel mics and you're sitting there for hours and then you just get up, I mean, there's no wires or nothing that you're aware of other than what's running from your lapel to your battery pack. It's pretty easy to forget about that shit. It really is.
Yeah, and he's an old man. He's an old man at this point too. It's like you could easily see our grandparents having that mic on and totally forgetting about it as well.
Absolutely. You
know, he's like in his 70s at this point.
Right.
And so they wrap up their interview and he's still mic'd up and he's basically, they keep the audio recording as he walks into the bathroom with the microphone on, still attached to his shirt, and he starts talking to himself saying, "What the hell did I do?" And he says, "You're caught." I think that was the first thing he said. "You're caught.
Yep.
They got you now. And what the hell did I do?" And he says the most chilling thing of all. He says, "Killed them all, of course."
Ooh.
Holy fuck. It's one of the most, I remember not knowing the Jinx, not watching it at the time, not even being necessarily, we weren't involved in true crime yet. I was obviously, I was always fascinated by it, but not following along with the Jinx or knowing the case in 2015. And it was before we ever did this podcast, but I remember people freaking out the next day after that episode was aired on HBO and talking about it and being like, just being curious about like, what happened? This guy admitted to killing someone in the bathroom while his mic was on. Like it was headline news all over the place.
Yes. But this also leads you to a little bit of the schizophrenia speculation, the way that he talks to himself, like, what the hell did I do?
Yeah.
And then he answers himself like, you killed them all, of course. It's like, whoa, who's talking, bro?
Yeah. I was going to say, you know what? Talking to yourself, I do it all the time. I don't know about you. I talk to myself a lot.
I guess so. Especially if you think you're in a private place. You know, you think, I mean, God, I mean, he was in the bathroom. You know, it's not weird to.
Have you ever like made an ass out of yourself in public before? Like you did a job interview and it went poorly. Like I that's the moments that I talk to myself like that, where I'm like fucking beating myself up. I've done just what he did before, and obviously not in such a serious situation, but
yeah, no doubt.
That's usually when you tend to talk to yourself the most, is when you're like, you really feel like an ass. You're like, fuck, I just look like an ass there, you know?
Yes. Or
why'd I do this? Why'd I screw this up?
Yes. Or you're under a lot of pressure as well, and you're trying to repeat some type of mantra or something like that. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And this is both instances. Mm-hmm. This is a lot of pressure, and you feel like you fucked up. So yeah, that's true. I guess any normal-minded person would be doing this at this time. Just made a mistake.
Yep. So his arrogance in filming this when he didn't need to, playing a role in this docuseries, is then ultimately what helped to put him behind bars. His lawyers, after this episode was released, his lawyers argued that it wasn't a confession. They said that the producers took two sentences he uttered at different points in the bathroom and spliced them together. But by the time that the episode had been aired, Mr. Durst was already in custody. 24 hours before the final broadcast, FBI agents detained Durst on a murder warrant in New Orleans, where he had booked a hotel room under an alias named Everett Ward. So he was on the run. He was headed to Cuba, actually. Mm-hmm. After that episode aired, he knew it was over, and they were able to catch him beforehand. John Lewin, a Los Angeles deputy district attorney, flew to New Orleans and interrogated Robert Durst the next morning. In addition to a .38 caliber revolver loaded with 4 live rounds and 1 spent shell casing, police recovered 5 ounces of marijuana. Holy fuck.
Damn.
Durst's birth certificate and passport, maps of Louisiana, Florida, and Cuba, a flesh-toned latex mask, the fake ID, Texas ID card used to check into the hotel, a new cell phone, and cash totaling $42,631. So he was getting the hell out of Dodge. He was headed to Cuba.
Oh, man. You could live a while probably in Cuba on $42,000, especially with...
Yeah, I don't think you can extradite from once he got there. I don't think they could extradite him back to the U.S. because obviously we have like the embargo and all the stuff with Cuba. We're not on good terms with them.
Oh yeah, he knew what he was doing.
Yeah, if he was able to get there, I don't know how you would get there, but
right.
Police discovered a UPS tracking number which led to an additional $117,000 cash and a pair of shoes and a package sent to Robert Durst by a friend in New York, which was seized after his arrest. Bank statements found in one of Durst's Houston condominiums revealed cash withdrawals of $315,000 in a little more than a month. Mm-hmm. He's believed to have planned to flee to Cuba after the HBO documentary aired, and since the U.S. and Cuba have no extradition treaty, he would have probably been able to hang out there and live out the rest of his life had he made it. As it was, he was captured before he was able to get to Cuba and denied bail by a Louisiana judge after the prosecutors agreed he was a flight risk and that he had plenty of means to gather a ton of cash no matter what they set the bail at. And in 2016, his former wife, Kathy's wife, Kathy, her family asked to have Kathleen declared legally dead, a request that was granted the following year. So they had given up on the idea that she had ran away, and succumbed to the idea that Bob had killed her.
Finally,
Kathleen's mother, Ann McCormack, attempted to sue Robert Durst for $100 million, alleging that he killed Kathy and deprived them of the right to bury her. Kathy's parents are now deceased. In 2019, a wrongful death lawsuit was filed against Robert Durst by another of Kathy's sisters, but was dismissed on the grounds that she had waited too long to file the lawsuit. So they were just not getting any help here.
Damn. That's bullshit.
In this case, we talked about how, it's relevant because in this year, he was going to trial for Susan Berman's murder, and was actually convicted in October.
Right.
And it started back in May 17th, 2021, when Robert went to trial for the murder of Susan Berman. The Westchester County District Attorney announced that Kathy McCormack's disappearance had been reclassified as a murder and would be reinvestigated as well. So finally, Kathy, the murder is getting reopened yet again. Then on December 24th, 2019, 19 years to the day after Miss Berman's body was found, Durst's lawyers made a chilling statement in court, saying they denied for nearly 2 decades that he had written the cadaver note. Durst now admitted to it. So he was basically doing himself in as far as the trial goes. He was admitting that he had written the murder note, and he himself had said that only the murderer could have written that note.
Right. Yeah, that was
so
undeniable.
Despite the admission, Dick DeGuerin, Mr. Durst's lead lawyer, said that the defense's bottom line remained unchanged. Bob didn't kill Susan, they said, and he doesn't know who did. Sure. Opening statements began for their trial of Miss Berman in March 2020, just before the coronavirus pandemic brought life in America to a halt. So it really drew this thing out, and you're just hoping at that point that Bob even makes it to see justice, because he's falling apart as well. He developed bladder cancer. He's in a wheelchair in trial. As of this moment, he looks like he could die at any moment. But luckily, he was able to be brought up in justice and convicted of murder for Susan Berman. The jurors, the defense argued to the jurors that they may have forgotten details or slipped in their obligations or not read or watched reports about the case during the long break because of the fact that the trial started in March 2020. You couldn't think of a worse time to start a trial. That was right when, the world went into full panic over Corona.
No doubt.
And testimony wasn't set to resume in May, and they called a 14-month delay, the longest adjournment featuring the same jury in U.S. history. And then the defense had, an argument to be made that, this long of a layoff, that they'd have to redo everything, that the jury would likely have forgotten all the details. But the judge, after interviewing the jury members, ordered the trial to proceed. And although Mr. Durst was charged with only one murder, the prosecution argued that the millionaire had killed Miss Berman because he feared that she would reveal what she knew about the disappearance of his wife. And after weeks of testimony in which prosecutors called 80 witnesses and introduced nearly 300 exhibits, the jury deliberated for about 7.5 hours before finding Robert Durst guilty on October 14th, and he was sentenced to life in prison without parole. Finally, his luck had run out, and part of him must have felt relieved, I think, honestly. He's going to have to answer to something he's done,
Yeah. Yeah, it's about fucking time, dude. But, like you say, he's probably going to die before it ever comes to fruition.
Yep. And in October, more big news came out. October of this year, shortly after Durst's first-degree conviction for the murder of Susan Berman, the Westchester County, New York District Attorney's Office announced they would impanel a grand jury to explore charges against Durst in the disappearance of his first wife, Kathleen McCormack Durst. Finally, Durst was charged officially with Kathy's murder on October 22nd, 2021, and he's currently pending trial for the fresh charge of murder in relation to Kathleen's murder 39 years after her disappearance. And all we can hope is that he actually makes it to that trial where he'll have to face up once again to something he's done. Not that he's ever getting out of prison, but finally, hopefully give Kathy's family some justice,
Yeah.
after all these years.
God.
And I'm not sure if Kathy's mother is still alive. She was when the Jinx was made in 2015, but she was very old at the time, and it's hard to imagine 7 years later, her still being around. I don't know. She was very, very old at the time.
Wow. You know what's crazy? You know, in the documentary, when at the very end, when Kathy's niece is interviewed, it's almost like Kathy reincarnated.
Oh my gosh, dude, she's
when
her
they
twin.
showed her, I was like, oh my God, Kathy's alive.
Right?
Oh, it was incredible. I thought it was her daughter. I was like, this has got to be her daughter. But I was like, wait a minute, she didn't have kids.
Yep.
Yeah, it was her niece, and it's just uncanny, like how much she looks like her.
Yep.
Carries herself like her, the way she speaks. Oh man. It's just
crazy.
It's downright creepy almost. How much she looks like her aunt.
Yeah. I agree. And that it must mean that much more to her, you know, this aunt that she never got to know, to see that, like, man, I'm basically like her reincarnated almost.
Yes.
It's crazy.
Maybe that helps the family, or maybe that makes it harder. I don't know.
Yeah.
Could go either way, I guess.
We have some more stuff to go over, because it is believed that Bob may be a serial killer, much like other cases we've covered, where, you know, you can connect him to missing women that he was in the area for. Days after the Susan Berman murder, police were reportedly examining connections between Robert Durst and the disappearances of 18-year-old Lynn Schultz from Middlebury, Vermont, and 16-year-old Karen Mitchell from Eureka, California, two areas that Bob was known to frequent. Investigators are also looking into a possible connection between Robert Durst and the disappearance of 18-year-old Kristen Modafferi, who was last seen in San Francisco in 1997. Schultz was a Middlebury College freshman, visited Durst's health food store on December 10th, 1971, the day she disappeared, and was last seen that afternoon near a bus stop across from the store. So as far back as 1971, when he still owned his health food store, he could have killed a woman. The timing of it is suspicious. She was at his store the day she was last seen. Author and investigative journalist Matt Birkbeck, who wrote the book that I got for this case, reported in 2003 and again in 2015 in his book A Deadly Secret, the book that I read, that credit card records placed Durst in Eureka on November 25th, 1997, the day that Mitchell vanished. She may have volunteered in a homeless shelter that Durst frequented. Durst, dressed in women's clothing, had visited the Eureka shoe store owned by Mitchell's aunt. So he has connections to all these missing girls over the years. Makes you wonder.
Does.
Mitchell was last seen walking to work from her aunt's store and possibly speaking to someone in a stopped car. A witness sketch of Mitchell's presumed abductor resembles Durst. Very much so.
Okay, that's getting kind of weird.
Yeah.
But all the other people that we know he killed, though, he killed for, viable reasons.
Yeah.
Really, or at least justifiable reasons to him.
There's no evidence.
Seems odd that he would just randomly pick these girls up.
There's no evidence to show that he was a sexually motivated serial killer, that he killed for pleasure. He killed out of utility, it seemed. He out of trying to avoid inconvenience, ultimately trying to avoid getting. He killed his first wife because she was going to divorce him and maybe expose some family corruption and things like that. And then he killed Susan Berman to cover up that murder, and then he killed Morris Black, seemingly out of inconvenience. Morris Black had inconvenienced him and also maybe threatened him and his, who knows what Morris knew. Morris knew he was wealthy.
Morris could have been
Morris
blackmailing
found out
him.
something about his wife's disappearance or something. Who knows?
Or Morris just found out, hey, you're wealthy and I'm in financial trouble and you're trying to hide. I'm going to tell everyone where you are if you don't give me X amount of money. And then off with them. But we're saying that there was no tie to these girls, but who knows? These two were having affairs and off and on allegedly throughout their marriages. Maybe he had affairs with these younger women, and to keep them quiet, he just got rid of them.
Yeah, it's also possible. Anything's possible with this guy. I mean, his behavior is all over the place. We know, much like other serial killers, he was all over the country and traveled overseas often as well. You can't rule anything out with him. And because of this, the FBI created an informal task force in 2012 to work with the investigative agencies in jurisdictions where Durst was known to have lived in the past decades, including Vermont, New York, and California. And in the wake of his recent arrest, the FBI encouraged such localities to re-examine old cold cases. Texas private investigator Bobby Baca has also traced Durst to operating under stolen identities in Texas, Florida, Massachusetts, New Jersey, South Carolina, Mississippi, and Virginia. So he had all of these,
holy shit,
all of these aliases, all of these stolen identities that he'd gotten, and you'd usually choose people that wouldn't be missed, people of meager means, and you would take their identity and go to another state with it and use it. So who knows? I mean, he's nearly impossible to trace his whereabouts over the years, especially when he was on the lam. But
yes,
that's the case of the Jinx.
Wow, and he did have them killer eyes, bro. Yep. He had those killer eyes.
He had my wife. My wife and I. She watched the last couple episodes of the Jinx with me. I had to explain, catch her up on everything. But one of the first things she said when she saw him on film, she was like, "He's got black eyes." I'm like, "I know, dude. He's got those
black.
He's got those. We've talked about it, how killers seem to morph. The darker their deeds, they go from looking normal, and their face just becomes demon-like. Like Bundy, you see his eyes turn black over the years. Like Durst had the same thing.
He really did. They were like hollow sockets, man. And just the way that his eyes would dart around the room, he always looked like he was just up to something nefarious, and there was just no soul in there at that time. He was just cold.
Yeah. But that is Bobby Durst, the Jinx. We hope you guys enjoyed it. But yeah, other than that, thank you guys so much for all of your support. All of the old patrons, all of the new patrons, thank you.
Absolutely.
And yeah, have a great week. We will see you for a Freeloader episode next week and for Just the Banter on Friday as usual.
That's right, guys. Well, have a Merry Christmas. Happy holidays to everybody.
All right, guys, keep creeping.
True crime guys, in the desert we like a mirage. It's okay if you clicked on us cause you thought we was True Crime Garage. Now we ain't mad at you, sit down, let us talk at you. I'm talking to the creeper army, we out here making murder, get murder. True crime guys, in the desert we like a mirage. It's okay if you clicked on us cause you thought we was True Crime Garage. Now we ain't mad at you, sit down, let us talk at you. I'm talking to the creeper army, we out here making murder charming.
From the minds of true crime guys, come
TCG Weekly. If you've enjoyed this episode, please feel free to check out all the other programs on the TCG network. Every Wednesday, a new episode of True Crime Guys proper, Strange and Unexplained on Mondays, and Full House Fantasy Football on Fridays to start your weekend. And if those aren't enough, head on over to our Patreon account, where you can have access to hundreds of hours of content, including older episodes and other Patreon exclusives like Strange Shorts, Sandu Stories, Higher Thoughts, and the 5-Minute Murder Show. But until next time, guys, keep creeping. Hey, how do you shut this thing off? Over?